So, I read every book in Skyrim ever. This is technically part 2 of a 2-part series. To catch you up from part 1 though, part 1 is mostly about the history, the geography, a lot of nitty-gritty details, a lot of the background information, and part 2, I would say, is arguably more of the fun stuff. This is fiction, poetry, journals, and a little bit of some lore later at the end. Part 2 has some of my more favorite stories. I would say the quantity of my favorite stories are in part 2, but part 1 does have a story that I think is the most interesting and one of the most unrealized lore in the Elder Scrolls, at least in my opinion, which is the real Baron Zaya. To keep it short and simple, without stalling, let's get into it. Part 8. Plays, Poetry, and Riddles. There are 21 plays, poetry, and riddle books in Skyrim, and we start with a book about one of my favorite races in the Elder Scrolls. The Betrayed by Engui Emeloth, translated by Calcimo of Markarth, an NPC that we will discuss a lot more in length later in this video. This is a poem written by the Falmer, which are technically the Snow Elves, but in Skyrim, they look a little bit more like goblins. It starts off with some beautiful Falmer script, which I always appreciate, these little details. It's the small things, really, that make everything so much more fuller, and details like this I always appreciate, I love. And this book was actually brought in through the Dawnguard DLC. The poetry itself in this book is simple. It follows an ABAB alternate rhyme scheme, but the poem itself is incredibly sad. It depicts the death of the Snow Prince, who we've talked about in length in part 1, but to give a little bit of a summary, depending on which book you read or on what you believe about the Snow Prince, you might get conflicting summaries or historical anecdotes, but in general, the Snow Prince died. He was a snow elf, and his death was arguably the turning point for the Falmer. After he died, the Nords basically won the battle, and the Falmer were pushed to side and ask for help with the Dwemer, who then enslaved them. And this is a poem pretty much about that. It captures their tragic enslavement by the Dwemer and their slow, agonizing descent into madness, torn from their home of ice and frost, thrown into the pitch-black dread of night, living in fear as their minds become lost, as their eyes begin dimming the light. What once was light turned to blackness, alone and betrayed, sinking deeper into madness. I rated this 3 stars. It's short, but it did move me quite a bit. Then we have The Death Blow of Abernanet by Geocrates Varnus, or Geocrates, like Socrates. That must be what it is. Geocrates, Socrates. In Skyrim, this is a skill book that increases your block skill. It's also a ballad that features footnotes and explanations at the end by the editor Geocrates Varnus, which I love the footnotes. It makes the book feel more lived in and real. I do like these, like I said, it's the little details that really make something feel tactile, alive, and like something that I would come across if I was actually studying poetry in Skyrim. The poem itself recounts a battle against a Daedra worshipper. The poetry is actually quite nice in this book, but it is so funny to see the word Abernanet used repetitively in a poem. I read this out loud, and fun tip, if you're ever reading poetry, please read it out loud. It helps make sense of it so much more. And reading that word again and again and again confused my brain somewhat. I really didn't know how to pronounce it for a minute, and I kept saying it differently. It's just a strange string of sounds, honestly. Anyway, the majority of the stanzas focus on the hero Rangadil, who blocks every single attack effortlessly. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have the 5 Songs of King Wulfharth by Anonymous. This one originated in the game Morrowind and has been quite a staple ever since. It's a collection of legends showcasing the sheer power of shouting, or as we know in Skyrim, the Thu'um, during the First Era. Specifically, we focus on King Wulfharth, who is considered the absolute master of the voice. This book also gives us the Nordic perspective on the Battle of Red Mountain, which, from the history section in part 1, is usually told by the elves. The primary difference between the Nordic and Elven perspectives of this battle lies in who is fighting and what was at stake. While the elves remember a civil war between themselves and the Dwemer over the heart of Lorcan, the Nords remember a failed holy war to reclaim their lost god's heart Shor's heart, after being lured into a trap by the devil of Dagoth. Wolfhearth is the ultimate Nord hero king of the book. He is so powerful that he literally cannot speak without destroying whatever is in front of him. I gave this book 2.5 stars, actually, not because the lore was not interesting, but because it was not the most interestingly written, and I did have to use a lot of supplemental information as well from my past reading to make sense of this. And I would have liked actual songs in this book. At least 2 lines, at least a snippet of a song, because this is the songs of Wolfhearth and we just get summaries of them. Which I know is probably a lot to ask for, but like I said before, and I'll keep stressing it, it is the little things. Then we get the 4 Totems of Volskyg by Anonymous. This is a poem, a puzzle, and a riddle all rolled into one book. You find these inscribed on the floor inside the ruins of Volskyg. This book actually helps you figure out the correct order to activate the levers to progress through the dungeon. I gave this 2 stars. We have Horror of Castle Ixir by Balith Cool, and this is our first play. We get a play. I was so excited when I saw this. I'm not even that into plays. I just love the idea that they wrote this. I love it even more because we actually get the playwright's directional notes in this book. For example, it says, "This line should be delivered without sarcasm. Trust the audience to laugh. It never fails." I love the confidence. But you know what? Pro tip for writing. That's true. Trust your reader, trust your audience. Don't over-explain things if you're ever writing a story. You don't need to hold their hand because it will get repetitive and annoying, and if it lands well, and if it doesn't for some people, then maybe they'll get it on a second try. The play itself follows an imperial captain investigating a castle for necromancy, only to be misled by a simple maid who claims her master is away. The maid is actually a high-level destruction mage who is actually using the castle as a torture chamber to test the limits of elemental magic on living subjects. The play ends with the lights going out, a cool little scary feature to spook the audience, and the mage easily overpowers the guards. I think I was so excited to see a play that I just automatically gave it 4 stars. I don't think I even cared about what we were given for its content. I just was excited about that. So I rated this 4 stars. Then we have A Hypothetical Treachery by Anthil Morvir. This is a story that follows a group of adventurers escaping with ebony mail, but this party quickly dissolves into backstabbing and murder. That's really not the interesting bit, believe it or not. Someone online actually wondered if this play was sort of speaking to the player. You could ask, is this play about us? There's a line in the play where an elven battle mage says, "Here I am, though why am I carrying the heavy load is beyond me. I always thought that the advantage of dungeon delving with a great barbarian was that he carried all the loot." And some people online felt that this was a direct call out to the player's experience, because if we think about it, and if we're honest with ourselves here, right? A moment of reflection. No matter what class you play, I think on everyone's first playthrough, in any video game, but especially an open world video game like Skyrim, you could be the stealthiest rogue in the world, and you will probably on your first playthrough have about 300 torches in your inventory that you collected, or linen cloths, and not even know it. And probably have even given your followers so much loot and things to carry that you've forgotten you even owned.
I am sworn to carry your burdens.
Anyway, back to the play. The backstabbing ensues, and only one of the characters from the party carries off with the loot. I rated it 3.5 stars. Then we have King Olaf's Verse by Anonymous. This is the slanderous book about Olaf, King Olaf, that we talked about in part 1. As a refresher, because I'm sure there was so much to retain from that first video, this poem accuses King Olaf One-Eye of being a tyrant who lied about capturing the dragon Numinex. Though this book says it was written by Anonymous, we actually learn that it was written by a character named Zvaknir. And fun fact, this book is the primary reason that the City of Solitude continues its annual tradition of burning Olaf's effigy during the Festival of Lights. I bet you didn't know that. Or maybe you do if you played the Bard's College questline, because this book is entirely tied to that. This book is specifically part of the Tending the Flames quest, and if you complete this quest, you can actually be part of the Burning of Olaf celebration, which is sort of like a Burning Man in Skyrim. I would imagine, I've never gone obviously I play video games instead. The book actually has scribbled out lines, which is pretty cool, where the text was lost or censored. And just to read a little bit of this infamous book. So ends the story of Olaf, the liar, a thief and a scoundrel we of solitude commit to the fire. In solitude, bards train for their service. They also gather each year and burn a king who deserves it. So you can understand why King Olaf was not a fan of Svaknir and why this book was so controversial. But so I ask you, do you think King Olaf was a liar, or do you think Svaknir was a liar? Which one was more ambitious, legacy-driven, or were they both? Did King Olaf actually do what he said, or did he just do a little bit of it and exaggerate? Did Svaknir actually tell the truth about King Olaf, or was he exaggerating a little bit of his faults to also make a name for himself through controversy? You could even argue that Svaknir actually did King Olaf a favor, because something I was thinking about while I was in Scotland, which is where I was in between filming these two videos and learning about some real medieval history, is that a lot of the most famous people that we talk about and remember and know are the most infamous people, the ones with the most controversy, which is something to say considering that Svaknir added a lot of slander to King Olaf's name, bringing him into controversy but making him more talked about, possibly even building his legacy bigger because of the negative attention. You know, people build careers off of negative press and attention, so I'm getting real far into that. Anyway, moving along, both of these characters can actually be found in Sovngarde, which is a place that you can go to in Skyrim, and it's a place for people who died heroically. So I do want to point out that Sovngarde is not a place for people who are necessarily good or bad. I did do some more digging about this book, and I found on an online forum that there is discussion about the Olaf that we meet in Sovngarde versus the Olaf that we meet if you play the quest line involving this book. And they talked about how the Olaf we meet in Sovngarde is magnanimous and actually seems to like the bard Svaknir. But the Olaf that we meet in Deadman's Respite, which is the location and part of the quest line for this book, is capable of using weapons and the voice, but has nothing but contempt for anyone or anything, especially Svaknir. Which makes me wonder if this was just an oversight, or if this is actually building something bigger narratively about spirits and the afterlife in the Elder Scrolls lore. If we think about ghosts, which is something I also did in Scotland, I stayed in an apparent haunted house. It makes me wonder if this is just building a bigger narrative about the ghosts in Skyrim and the afterlife, because in part 1 we talked about, you know, what is a soul in Nirn, in the Elder Scrolls? And we don't really know much. We just know they're an energy source. What if the Olaf in Sovngarde is just a fraction of the whole Olaf, right? The heroic fraction of him gets to live in Sovngarde, but the resentful one lives in Deadman's Respite. You know, maybe it's all fractured. It's something to consider. Anyway, I rated this 4 stars. Then we have The Legend of the Crately House by Balith Cool, another play by Balith Cool, but this play is about 2 thieves who break into the famous Crately House in Cheydon Hall, which is actually a location you can visit in Oblivion. I'll talk more about that in a second. The thieves believe that they can calculate a perfect score by robbing ghosts who supposedly can't see or hear them. This play does follow a similar horror twist formula that Balith Cool wrote in his last play, which is something that I like because it does sort of show consistency with the in-game authors. And like I said, you can actually visit this house in Oblivion, but it's not called the Crately House. It's actually the headquarters of the Dark Brotherhood. And I actually do remember going through this house when I was a kid playing Oblivion and being quite spooked. Anyway, the play itself, this book itself, I rated it 3 stars. Then we have Love Poem by Calcimo. We have a love poem. This poem is supposedly written by our Dwemer and Falmer expert, Calcimo.
You idiot! Do you even know who I am?
This poem itself is involved in a really sweet side quest in Skyrim. In the game, you can actually work as like a little matchmaker, a little dragonborn Cupid shooting little love arrows. If you go to the Temple of Mara, you can get a quest to help 3 people find love, and Calcimo is one of them. Spoiler, which I don't even know why I'm saying that. If you're watching this video and you've made it to this part, just assume that there will be spoilers. Calcimo has a crush on Faylene, who is the housecarl in Markarth. She's indifferent, but if you speak to Ingvar, a bard in Markarth, and who's also a friend to Faeline, he will write a poem for her saying it's written by Calcimo. So it's a bit of like a deceptive poem. There's some trickery in this love story, but aren't all good love stories involved in some type of deception? I don't actually know that. Is that true? Romeo and Juliet, deception. The Notebook, slight deception. Oh, Love Island. Have you ever seen that? All of that's trickery. And there's been some real cute couples that have come out of that show. It's interesting to talk about Love Island in a Skyrim video. Feels like two very separate worlds. If you deliver this letter to Faeline, she'll actually be quite moved by it and will wish to confess her feelings for Calcimo. But depending on whether you play the Civil War questline in Skyrim, Faeline might actually move to Solitude. And so the timing of this quest does sort of shift things a little bit, because if she is in Solitude, Calcimo will actually run all the way over there to speak with her and for them to confess their love, which is even more of a romantic outcome because I researched this. Calcimo will actually run all the way there. He will take several in-game hours to reach her just so they can confess their feelings for each other, which is so romantic. I'm also actually impressed by the poem itself, since it is written by Ingvar and he is actually a bard, and the poem is actually one of the better poems I've read. And considering that he did study this, it's nice that the devs did take a little bit extra time to write, in my opinion, a more well-crafted poem. And also I like that because Ingvar is a Nord, he used imagery that he knows, such as like stones and cold weather, very Nordic. Whereas Calcimo is a high elf who is a mage and studies Falmer and Dwemer, and should he have written the poem, or if he did write the poem, it probably would have used imagery that was related to like darkness and light and conjuring. The poem itself has a harder rhyme scheme as well. It's a little bit more complex in its nature. So just a nice touch overall from the devs, and I liked the effort here, especially considering that it was written by an actual bard. I rated this 5 stars. And then we get to the book that you all have been waiting for. I think we all know. I think you know. It's the most liked comment on part 1. Say it first. The Lusty Argonian Maid by Crassius Curio. We made it. Possibly the most famous book in Skyrim. And it's so ironic that it is, but it makes so much sense that it is. When I first wrote this script and took notes, I didn't have much to say about the Lusty Argonian Maid, but I listened to your comments, or I read your comments. I heard what you guys had to say, and I said, no, I need to dive deeper into this book. There are 2 volumes of this series, and it's salacious. To be honest though, the real Baron Zaya is more graphic than this, especially the uncensored version that you can read or find online. That one is way more crazy. Like there's not even a comparison between those 2 books. It's like apples to oranges. And this is technically a play. That's right. You can even reenact this if you want. A fun bedroom activity, maybe. This book goes all the way back to the Morrowind game, and in that game, the only way to actually find this book is on the body of the author, Crassius Curio. You can actually obviously meet him, and he is quite the character. However, in Skyrim, this book actually features 2 volumes, which the second volume was actually added in the game Skyrim. So I assume that they listened to you guys, they were in the forums, and they gave you what you wanted. From my understanding, the story of the Lusty Argonian Maid is apparently just passed down folktales condensed into a play, or a sort of play. This book can also be found in Helga's room in Riften, though that is the most tame part. But okay, so what's the story of this play? I know you're dying to know, the few who probably have not read that book. Well, to summarize it, it really is just 2 people polishing spears and baking bread. When I was thinking about what to rate this, I gave it a lot of thought, and I decided to rate it 4 stars because while I might have initially thought it was 2.5 stars, I'm afraid of you guys. No, I'm kidding. Okay, I actually rated it 2.5 stars. And I'm sorry. Then we have Ode to the Tundra Striders by Anonymous. This is an ode But to the mammoths and the giants in Skyrim, I love that we get a poem about them instead of just like an instruction manual, considering that they are newly added creatures in the Elder Scrolls. And when we first see them, when this game first came out, was quite a moment. Like, they're just such cool creatures. They're so large and they deserve an ode. And for the record, an ode is like a celebratory poem. This one is about a giant and their mammoth companion walking side by side and even snuggling together. It's written very graciously and paints them to be very noble and actually quite friendly. I rated this 4 stars. Then we have The Pirate King of Abakian by Velek Sane, a violent poem about Velek Sane. All right, he's a literate pirate who wrote a poem about himself. We love hubris. It's a poetic warning about him coming to kill you, so watch out. The rhyme scheme is there, loosely. It's sort of a chaotic poem, which I think fits the nature of Velek Sane, but I'll just read you a little bit of it. Poke out your eyes, lad, pour lead in your ears. Those sails portend madness, dark horror and fear. Abandon your lasses, your ship and your gold. Blood on the water, Velek this way comes. Not too bad, actually. Reading it again, I'm a little bit like, all right, Velek, quite the poet here, quite the sensitive, tortured artist, I suppose. You can actually meet him in the game as part of a quest in the College of Winterhold, and maybe if you do choose to meet him, you can get his autograph, and maybe he can write it in your blood. Isn't that sweet? I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Power of the Elements by Anonymous. This is a quest book that can only be obtained once you reach level 90 in Destruction Magic and speak to Feralda at the College of Winterhold. You know, we don't get many books in the game that are gatekept like this, so it does make it unique. It's also entirely a riddle to help your character solve a puzzle for the quest that this book is involved in. The quest is called Destruction Ritual Spell, and actually as you complete more of the quest, the text is slowly revealed to you over time, which I think is kind of cool. This is the first time we've encountered a book like this, so that's nice. It does feel like a magical book. Also, the cover of this book is the symbol of the Mages Guild in Cyrodiil from the Oblivion game, which is like a nice little throwback. I rated this 3 stars because I think it's a good piece of environmental storytelling, and I do like that it's a little bit more involved, and there is a game mechanic that is included in this book, which allows the text to be slowly revealed as you progress through the quest. We then get our first book of riddles, which is exciting. We have the Red Book of Riddles by Anonymous. This book is for the socially aspiring person of Tamriel who might fear being outshined in conversation. It presents riddles that purely rely on puns, and I solved 0 of them. But more interesting than that, there's actually an Imperial Library Discord community online that has a monthly challenge where fans take a piece of in-game text and give it a non-standard reimagining. For example, they gave us the Book of Orange Riddles. That's right, we have a super secret book. But before that, I rated the Red Book of Riddles 2.5 stars. I didn't think the riddles were that good. Or maybe I'm salty because I couldn't solve them. Maybe they were too good. Okay, 3 stars. I won't be bitter. But we have the Book of Orange Riddles by the fans. This is my secret Skyrim book that I didn't include in my number count because this is a form of deception, like the love poems. This is my love deception for you, the audience. Every riddle in this book has the same answer, and I will let you figure it out for yourself. In fact, I'll give you a chance to solve it right now, in this moment. On the first page, exquisitely inked, is the following text. I am a citrus. Good job, the answer is orange. I'll give you another one. In matters of alchemy, I may be used to fight fatigue, detect the living, burden the enemy, and shield the ally. What am I? An orange. I rated this 5 stars, and I solved all of them. Then we have The Secret of Ragnvald by Anonymous. This is a poem about 2 heroes who trap the insane dragon priest Otar the Mad. This serves as lore for the Ragnvald ruin, where players must defeat Otar by finding 2 keys held by the hero's spirits. There's a staccato style to this. It's very Nordic in my opinion. It's sort of rallying and drum-like which makes it fun to read. But this is another secret book. Aha, I've tricked you again. This book was actually cut from the game. It's still in the game files, and to get it, you have to use a cheat or go to the cutting room floor of Skyrim. Anyway, I rated it 2.5 stars. Then we have Song of Horrormere by Anonymous. This is an epic poem about Horrormere, a Nordic hero, as he defies the Daedric prince Nocturnal with clever wit. Now, I first want to point out that Daedra princes are technically genderless in the Elder Scrolls lore, but throughout the books, you will see that there are genders given to them and they change. For example, in this epic poem, Nocturnal is female or presenting as female in this book, but that's not necessarily what Nocturnal is, because apparently they just don't have a gender. They're just spirits and they take on forms and shapes depending on what their motivation is, I guess. That's at least what I read online. It does change depending on what you're reading. I do like this line about Nocturnal. It goes, "Her hideous face forced the moons to hide themselves." Oof, imagine being told that by the person you like. This is a clever poem because Horrormere makes a promise with Nocturnal to save his friend. He offers his own soul to her, and she agrees and makes him her champion. And Horrormere makes a series of very specific promises. He promises to turn back on the truth. He then promises to help her sons, the Dark Kings, divide their inheritance evenly. And then he promises to love Nocturnal and think she is beautiful. He deceives her by taking these promises very literally. He loved her and found her beautiful by sleeping with her a lot. And he divided the Dark Kings by literally cutting them into pieces. That's how he divided the inheritance. And he turned his back on the truth by being a complete trickster, by finding the loopholes to all of his promises. Also, fun little fact, Nocturnal in the story is presented as a hag, and in Oblivion, when this book was actually first introduced, we didn't have those creatures yet, but in Skyrim, we have hag ravens. Also, Horrormere first declines to help his friend when he finds out that his friend is in danger because he's on a quest to drink 12 flagons of mead in 1 hour, and then to bed 4 wenches twice each, which is very Nordic of him. I rated this 5 stars. I thought it was super entertaining. I really liked this one. We then have Song of the Askeladd Men by Athenian monks at Old Anthel. This is an old Nord poem from the 3rd era, and Skyrim, for the record, takes place in the 4th era. It's told from the perspective of a dead Falmer ghost watching his Nord killers celebrate after slaughtering the rest of his kind. I actually really like this poem. I like the concept of it too, the perspective of the Falmer watching this. And I like the ending of the poem because the ghost cries out in anguish, and one of the Nordic men actually then sees him and casts a shout, which then finally sends the ghost to peace. I thought that was just really sweet because even though they had their differences, I do like the idea that the Nord man who killed him and his friends or his people did still want him to find peace in the afterlife. I gave this 4 stars. We then have Songs of Skyrim by Various, not Anonymous. Various. What a lovely word. I actually would be such a good name. Various. Anonymous. Both would be lovely names. Missed opportunity. This collection is curated by Gerard Germain of the Bard's College, and it's a book about all the bardic songs you can hear in-game, which is fun. You can sing along to them. I rated this 4 stars for the variety and a fun sing-along opportunity. We then have, and I wonder if you even know this book exists, only the true Skyrim fans will know of this book, The Sultry Argonian Bard by Elia Erdane. That's right, we get a continuation of the lusty Argonian maid. Sort of. This is actually part of the Dawnguard DLC, and there's only 1 copy of this book in the entire game. It's obviously a parody of the lusty Argonian maid, which is amazing. Clearly the devs are in the forums, and they heard you. You lusted, and they answered. The author is different from the lusty Argonian maid. Our author for that was Crassius Curio, and our author for this is Elia Erdane. Maybe she was a fan. Maybe it was sort of like a Twilight 50 Shades of Grey situation. And for those who don't know, 50 Shades of Grey, the author E.L. James, I believe, I think that's her alias, she was a fan of Twilight and wrote a fan fiction about Bella and Edward, and then that became 50 Shades of Grey. Someone actually commented on a forum about this book that it's actually like 50 Shades of Greybeards, which is the official review of this book. I rated it 3 stars. The Third Door by Aninar Orme. This book is about a woman scorned. She falls for a man who does not love her back and admits that he loves another woman, which was stupid of him because the woman that he doesn't love finds the woman that he does love and then kidnaps her. She then makes a deal with Sheogorath and Mephala, the Daedra princes, and creates this torturous plan, which I just want to say I love the mention of Sheogorath. I missed him. She has the woman that the man loves choose between 3 doors to find him. She picks one and finds only the top half of him. It's written in basic rhyme scheme and in AABBCCDD. It was fun to read though. However, the twisted reveal was a little bit hard to follow at first, so I rated it 3 stars. Then for our final book of this section, we end on another book of riddles, The Yellow Book of Riddles by Anonymous. And once again, I got 0 out of 3 right. I did like this one more than the Red Book of Riddles, but nothing compares to the Orange Book of Riddles. I rated this 3.5 stars. And that was our last book of this section, which is really nice. Not that it's the last book, but this section was really nice. If you're coming from part 1, then you would know how intense the history section that we ended with was. And so stepping into something lighter and nice and easier to follow, I wish there were more, to be honest. I had so much fun reading this section. I think they provided a lot of highlights for the lore as well, but more on that later. Part 9, Fiction. Possibly my favorite section in the entire series. Also, the second largest section of the entire series, but nothing beats the history section. There are 64 fiction books in Skyrim, and we're starting off with actually a pretty strong story. Our first one is The Adventures of Eslaf Errol by Revan, which you'll come to learn that in this book, everything is spelled backwards. So for example, if you read Eslaf Errol by Revan, it's actually False Lore by Never, and that's a common theme in this book. So all the names are weird and unpronounceable at a certain point. And I know I can't pronounce any name, but these are really unpronounceable. This is actually a 4-volume fictional series, and the book follows the life of Eslaf, or False, but we're gonna call him Eslaf, on his journey from poverty to reclaiming the kingdom of Errolgard. Volume 1 is called Beggar, and this is a funny little satirical story. It mocks Nordic tradition and the shared cruelty of life in Skyrim. It starts with King Utulaf, which is technically King Faulty, who decides to follow his wife to the grave, but not before dividing his estate and assets among his favorite children. He gives his title to Yenoph, which is phony, and his land to Laernu, which is unreal, his fortune to Suobud, which is dubious, and his army to Lekifitra, which is artificial. But his youngest son, Eslaf, is forgotten about until the king's very final moments of life. Quite literally bleeding out and irritable, he gifts his final son nothing but the permission to take. Eslaf is raised by Druspa, which is absurd. Not the name, that's her name spelled backwards. A nurse so shy that she literally runs away anytime Eslaf tries to ask her a question. So in order for him to actually get an answer, he becomes a world-class sprinter. This is also a skill book for pickpocketing. Then we get volume 2 called Thief. This is not as good as Beggar in my opinion. It's not as funny, but it's still entertaining. Eslaf tracks down the richest man in the world, which is his brother Soabed. Eslaf decides that he wants to be a thief in order to achieve anything, in order to live any kind of life. And he decides, if you're gonna be a thief, why not rob the richest man? He learns that to actually be a good thief, you need to be good at falling out of windows or jumping out of them, which is actually kind of true. This book is essentially a guide for how to be a good thief. This is also a skill book for pickpocketing, and the main plot of this entire volume is really just about Eslaf learning how to fall out of windows. Volume 3 is called Warrior, and it's still not as good as Beggar, but we do finally get to meet Soabed, his brother, and we learn that having a vast fortune has made him a paranoid, lonely shut-in. We do get some Jazbay lore and mention. We learn that it's a sought-after alchemical ingredient from Eastmarch, and Soabed is trying to monopolize it and profit from it. Eslaf and his brother do meet, though they don't recognize each other, and they fight physically. They are horrible at it. They're so bad that they essentially are just dancing around each other, and This is actually a skill book for blocking. But Eslaf is still the better of the two, and he escapes, and with a precious gem. And then we have our final volume, volume 4, which is called Keen. This is actually a really good ending to our series, and it also revived the humor from the first book. Eslaf flees to the Sea of Ghosts with an apple-sized gem that he stole from his brother, and he tries to trade it for a beer or an ale, but is intercepted by his sister, Lekafitra. Artificial, whatever. They make a bargain, and he actually ends up becoming the employer of her army. He's quite the smooth talker. He ends up wandering back to Errolgard and finds that the kingdom is in decay and decides to do what he does best, which is burgle the palace. He finds King Yanof, or King Phony, who actually hates being king so much that he practically asks Eslaf to rob his kingdom, rob it from him. And since they are brothers, upon first seeing each other, they discover that they actually look like twins. And so they just simply swap places. The series ends on a note that the siblings given something were all miserable, but Eslaf, given nothing but the permission to take, actually becomes the most capable. This is also a skill book for two-handedness. Online, someone mentioned that the series is an illustration or a satire on the concept of enantiomorph, which is, in summary, the mirror image of something. Overall, I actually rated this 5 stars. It was genuinely very entertaining to read. And if you're going to read any Skyrim book, I would say this is one of the ones worth reading for sure. Our next book is Ancient Tales of the Dwemer by Merobar Sol. This is a fictional, incomplete record of book fragments split into 7 separate volumes. Only a handful of them are skill books. The 3rd book is a skill book for one-handedness, the 4th is for alchemy, and the 5th is for heavy armor. Also, do you guys remember Gore Fellum? If you do, kudos to you. Gore Fellum was mentioned in our histories and lore section. He wrote the book Dwemer History and Culture, except he also went by another alias. Again, it's kind of his thing. He went by Esfat Antibolus for that book, and he is known as the guy who writes fabricated and false stories about the Dwemer. Now, in the first volume of this series, we get a publisher's note from the University of Gwilym Press stating that Merobar Sol, the author of this book, is actually an alias for Gore Fellum, and because of this, we have to take everything written in this book with a grain of salt. There are publisher's notes all throughout this series. After every volume, it dismisses all the names and information as false. It does feel like reading angry comments at times, which is kind of funny. These stories are unrelated to one another, except that they are loosely based around the Dwemer. And by loosely, I mean they are just Dunmer, Argonian, and Ashlander myths with dwarven names slapped on them, according to the publisher. The story for most of them roughly follows the same formula. A character faces a threat and they use logic, physics, or observation rather than brute force to win. The 4th volume is actually a poem, unlike the others, which are prose. The 4th might be my favorite of the whole series because it is just so playful. It talks about 2 alchemists vying for a spot to work for the king. One of them brews ingredients that he confuses for something else because the light from the glass ceiling changes their hue. The ultimate lesson from that is that perspective can flaw logic. Also, we get this note from the publisher which says, "The final joke that the stupid alchemist invents a potion to make himself smarter by pure accident would have appealed to the anti-intellectualism of audiences in the interregnum period, but would certainly be rejected by the Dwemer," which I thought was a lot of words, but also some cool world building, and I do love that our publisher has a voice. The 5th book might be one of only 2 volumes in this series with actual Dwemer origins. In it, we learn that the Dwemer might have been the first race to wear heavy armor, which I think is a pretty cool detail. We also hear about this concept called the Calling, which the Sijic Order suggests they too hear in some form. Also, golems. We get golems. I mean, we don't get them, but we get a mention of them. The 7th volume might also be the other story with real Dwemer origins. It addresses the fundamental conflict between Dwemer reason and Daedric divinity. In the Elder Scrolls lore, the Dwemer didn't believe in gods. They viewed the Aedra and Daedra as earth bones or powerful entities to be studied and harnessed like steam or lightning, which I think is a pretty cool perspective. It also suggests that the Dwemer vanished because they offended the gods, which yeah, if they didn't view them as gods, that definitely would be an offense. All of these books were originally from the Morrowind game. While the information is fabricated and mostly false, I did rate this book 4.5 stars because I love the commentary. I love the conflicting information we get, also the additional information we get. I think the stories were also interesting, even if they weren't technically Dwemer stories. Then we have the Argonian account by Wulfin Jarth. This series consists of 4 books. It is a satirical account of imperial colonialism and bureaucracy. We follow a character named Scotty. Scotty is a clerk on a quest to fix a failed trade deal in Blackmarsh. However, the moral of the story is that the Imperials fundamentally misunderstand how the land works. In many ways, Blackmarsh is a character and likely the true protagonist of the story. The book paints Blackmarsh so wonderfully horrific, but intriguing and beautiful. This book adds so much to the world building, and I think it really is a great way to expand beyond what we are given in the Elder Scrolls games. I know in ESO it expands more, but I do feel like it's a bit watered down in any online game, of course. Scotty is a very likable underdog, even though he's kind of a selfish capitalist. The story is funny and easy to follow. It's a great way to get a good idea of what the world looks like outside of Skyrim, and I think it's written pretty well. I was thoroughly entertained throughout it, and I really did feel for Scotty. I feel like because he's sort of unlikable, all the bad things that happen to him make him likable. Like I said, he's the underdog. Here's a good quote to describe Blackmarsh. Scotty figured that soon enough he would be dead, and that would be better than being in Blackmarsh. I gave this 4 stars. Then we have The Beggar Prince by Anonymous, and I feel like out of every book in the game, I would come across this one the most. And when I looked up all of its locations in the game, I realized why I felt that way, because there are so many. And before I started reading this book, I wondered why. Even while playing, I always wondered why this book specifically. I always just assumed it was random. But this short story is actually pretty good, and I do wonder if the devs were trying to get any person to read it because of the effort and maybe pride that they have with this story. Maybe. This book actually originated in the Oblivion game, where the Thieves Guild is one of the primary factions. I would say it's one of the more noteworthy, more important, more central factions out of all the other ones. This book ties into the lore of the beggars being the best information brokers, proving there's so much more to them than meets the eye. The story is also built fantastically on irony. Weedle, a prince who is the 13th in line to the throne in Valenwood, wants to make a name for himself that will live through the ages. Ultimately, Weedle does get his wish. He becomes a prince, but only a prince of the wretched and sickly. He makes a deal with the Daedric Lord Namira, the Lady of Disease and Decay. She grants him quite literally disgusting gifts. He gains fame and fortune, but he has to trade his literal skin and his social status to get it. He is so grotesque looking that people pity him and feel sorry and do just give him gold. They also overlook him sometimes, and this is sort of where it ties in that the beggars are so overlooked that people don't really pay attention when they're saying things around them, and that's how they're able to get a bunch of information. I think it is truly a really wonderful short story. I rated this 5 stars. Then we have The Black Arrow by Gorgic Gwyn. This series consists of 2 books. To be honest though, the only part you need to know or is worth talking about is a trick shot where an arrow is fired through a keyhole to assassinate a duchess. The rest of the story was not very interesting, but that part was pretty cool. I gave it 2 stars. Then we have Breathing Water by Heliel Merm. Heliel Merm, and I want to get this name right because I loved this story. I love this story so much. If you want to read it, go and read it now before I talk about it, because I will be spoiling the ending in talking about it. This is a story about irony. As you will come to learn, so many Skyrim fiction stories are built on irony and a very similar formula. but maybe because I read this one first, it landed better with me. Anyway, this story follows a boy who wishes to learn how to breathe underwater, or to breathe water itself. He masters the spell and sets a goal to swim down to find lost treasure from a sunken ship. He successfully reaches the wreck, but while he is down there, he spends too much time picking out which treasure to bring up. He finds a locked box and discovers the key on the body of a sailor. He realizes the sailor was trying to reach that box even as the ship was sinking, thinking that this must contain something special, important, worth a lot of gold. He opens it only to find a flask. He finds this funny, assuming the sailor just wanted to have a last drink before he died. But this realization distracts him, causing his spell to fail, and he begins to drown. When his body eventually floats to the surface, it's found by other dock workers who are used to seeing this sort of thing. But what they find strange is that he was clutching a potion of water breathing in his hand the entire time. I also loved this line from the book. There is a character in the story, Saren, who teaches him how to water breathe masterfully. And she says, "But the spells of alteration are all about uncommon sense, the infinite possibilities. Breaking the sky, swallowing space, dancing with time, setting ice on fire, believing that the unreal may become real. You must learn the rules of the cosmos and then break them." This is a skill book for alteration. I rated this 5 stars. Obviously, I loved this story. I think it's a really good short story with wonderfully interesting characters and well-developed characters for such a short story. It has sharp dialogue and a killer ending. Then we have The Cabin in the Woods by Mogan, son of Molag. This is our technical first horror story, like a genuine first horror story. We've had a horror play, but this is our first horror fiction. Someone actually said online that this was the first book they ever read in the game, and they read it while in a cabin in the game, and it genuinely spooked them. The plot follows a battle-worn soldier who is relentlessly stalked through a forest by a sobbing, ghostly woman wielding an axe. Although he eventually manages to barricade himself in a cabin and seemingly destroys the spirit using magic, the victory is short-lived. As he finally emerges from the woods, he hears her haunting cries following him once again, suggesting that he hasn't escaped at all. I rated this 3 stars. I don't know if I found it the most scary, but I feel like if this was the first book you ever read and you were reading it at night in Skyrim in your room while it was night in real life, maybe it would be a bit spooky. I could definitely see that. And also, if this is the first book you've read, it's a pretty decent story to read, and it's like pretty short. It's not very long at all. Then we have The Cake and the Diamond by Athen Muendil. This is another book from Morrowind, and it is a story that follows a Dunmer who has stolen a massive diamond. He and his friends are essentially low-level criminals looking to turn a profit. A Breton alchemist offers to turn the diamond into potions of invisibility. She claims that because she works by hand and skill rather than the Mages Guild's scientific methods, she can leave a portion of the diamond intact as her payment. To prove her trustworthiness, she presents 2 small cakes and a silver knife. She suggests a fair test. Odiad, one of our characters, one of our thieves, will cut a cake in half, and she will eat one piece and he will eat the other. This is meant to prove that the cakes aren't poisoned and that the invisibility actually works. But in reality, she didn't put the diamond dust, the active alchemical ingredient for invisibility, into the cake at all. Instead, she coated only one side of the knife blade with it. She ate the piece that touched the coated side, turned invisible, and then snuck off with the diamond. I feel like this one wasn't as interesting compared to the other ones, so I just gave it 3 stars. We then have Chance's Folly by Zilmok Golg. This is about a master thief known by the alias Chance, who decides to graduate from robbing shops to looting a legendary tomb. In the game Morrowind, you can actually find this tomb and see the aftermath of the ending of this book. Seeking a bodyguard, Chance recruits a mad Breton warrior named Ulster. He is dismissed by society as an eccentric who listens to voices in his head. When Chance finds the gold, she immediately prepares to kill or abandon Ulster. However, as she steps into the treasure room, the door shuts behind her, and because it is a magical one-way door, it appears as a solid wall from the inside, trapping her forever. It turns out Ulster wasn't actually insane, sort of. He was in communion with Sheogorath, who, by the way, is the Daedric Prince of Madness. Ulster plotted this pretty much with Sheogorath. I rated this 3 stars. We then have A Dance in Fire by Woofin Jarth. This is by the same author who wrote the Argonian account. Apparently this book is a prequel to the Argonian account because our favorite capitalist underdog, Scotty, is back. This is also a series divided into 7 books. This is essentially another fish out of water tale. Our Scotty is a man of the city. He likes clean clothes, precise contracts, and 4 meals a day. When his firm, the Atreus Building Commission, begins to fail, he heads to Valenwood to take advantage of the 5-year war between the Bosmer, also known as the Wood Elves, and the Khajiit. A lot of fans actually love this book because of the world building regarding Valenwood. The charm of Woofin Jarth's work is his character Scotty and the insane circumstances he gets into. For example, waking up to the sensation of being kissed, only to open his eyes and find an insect is eating him alive. The descriptions of Valenwood are beautiful too. I totally understand why this is a fan favorite. I think it does bring a lot of excitement or cause a lot of excitement for potentially seeing the Elder Scrolls world expanded in a future video game. The plot itself isn't the most interesting, which makes it does feel slow at times for me, but Scotty is always a good time to read about. I think Scotty is really what makes Woofin Jarth's series to be the most interesting, as well as the location. The plot itself is really not the most interesting, but I think that's kind of the point. Anyway, I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have The Death of a Wanderer by Anonymous. This story is about an unnamed narrator sitting by the deathbed of their old Argonian friend. While sorting through their friend's possessions, the narrator finds a carved claw. The claw described in this book has symbols of a bear, an owl, and some kind of insect. That's right, this is about the Golden Claw, which is part of the first main quest you ever do if you play Skyrim. We all know Bleak Falls Barrow. The friend in the story realizes the symbols on the key are actually like sanity checks designed to be solved only by the living, which means the doors in Bleak Falls Barrow weren't built to keep thieves out, but rather to keep the Draugr in, which really does add a nice bit of world building regarding this claw and the Draugr creatures and our first main quest. I did like that the key was given a backstory and a reason for its existence rather than just adding an extra step for your character to go through or for the player to go through. Like, I do like that there is a little bit of lore. I actually rated this 3 stars. Then we have The Exodus by Woofin Jarth. This is another story by Woofin Jarth, and it feels very Stephen King. It's possibly our second horror story. I would say this is like Pet Sematary meets Skyrim, and I would also say Woofin Jarth is a very talented writer. The plot follows 2 desperate parents who take their dying daughter to a secret island of friendly necromancers hoping for a miracle cure. The necromancers actually seem like very nice people. They live on this abandoned island which experienced a lot of death, and they simply live there because there are plenty of dead bodies to practice on. Our group of necromancers consists of a woman, a younger man, and an old man. The necromancers tell the parents that their own son died at the age of 6 and they revived him as well, basically empathizing and saying that they've been through what these current parents are going through. When the parents ask the necromancers where their son is now, the necromancers nod to the wrinkled old man. When understanding dawns on the parents, by then it's too late because the necromancers have already killed their daughter only to revive her into a child corpse. The book ends with the sound of their daughter's footsteps coming toward them, sounding creepy and old. This is also a skill book for restoration, and I rated this story 5 stars. Our next story is Fae Folken by Woofin Jarth, who is almost as booked and busy as Anonymous. This series is divided into 3 books and even features a mention of Vanus Galerian. Remember him from the very beginning of part 1? He was mentioned in our biography section. He was the dude who went to the Sijic Order. He was like super talented. His father was illiterate and he was illiterate, but they learned how to read and his mom betrayed them. I cannot believe I remembered that from memory. It's told as a story being told by a great sage to 2 of his pupils, serving as a lesson to them about magic. In book 1, a 6th scribe named Thorbad writes bulletins for the Temple of Ariel. It's really his main access to the world too, because he is a bit of a hermit since he is sick. This book also establishes that back in the 2nd era, the Mages Guild had automated enchanting stations where any person could pay to create a super powerful item without needing any actual skill. This was actually created by Venus Galarian, which is kind of cool. It's nice to see characters from across other books be brought in, be folded into the mix. Thorbad tries to impress his boss, who is a bit cold and mean, by enchanting a quill. He enchants his quill with a Daedric soul called Feyfoken, or named Feyfoken, and this is where book 1 ends. We start book 2 with Thorbad's enchanted quill working too well. The bulletins he begins to write become so beautiful and poetic that the whole city starts actually weeping. He becomes quite famous from this, and our people are lining up to read his bulletins, and his boss, Alfiers, actually quits in shame. Thorbad finally becomes famous and rich, but he realizes he has lost control when he tries to scribble word vomit on a piece of parchment, and the quill automatically transforms it into high-level poetry. Then we get to book 3, where Thorbad thinks he is free after he literally breaks the quill in half and then throws it away. But every time he tries to write something honest with a regular plain quill, Feyfoken continues to autocorrect it, because when he broke the quill, he didn't break the curse or the spell. Feyfoken now follows him around regardless, and he begins to solely mess with Thorbad. The ending is very dark, but I think very fitting, and I think a good ending for the story overall. Not that it's a good ending. A healer of Thorbad's actually sends him a note saying he's cured and he's no longer sick anymore, which is what Thorbad has always wanted. But he's been driven insane by Feyfoken that when he reads the note, he thinks it's mockery from the Daedra, and he takes his own life. The quill then finds its way to his ex-boss Alfiers, and then begins the cycle all over again. 5 stars. We then have Final Lesson by Agrothius Goth. This is sort of a sequel to Feyfoken, but it's by a different author. So the characters in this book are the characters from Feyfoken, not all of them, the Sage and the 2 Pupils. Both books originated from the game Morrowind, but they do have different authors, and I wonder if this was just the devs maybe quickly adding authors to stories and not really thinking too much about it, like if this was just an oversight, or what the reason really was behind having these 2 books be written by different people. And it's another book with the same formula as Feyfoken, where the Great Sage is teaching the 2 pupils a lesson. But the tale in this story is about 2 characters named Uthrak and Lorith. Both of them are mages, but one of them stays home to learn everything from his master, while the other is forced to go out into the world, survive on his own, learn on his own. We learn that the one who stayed home became a safe, respectable, but minor enchanter, and the one who was forced to go off on his own and maybe have a harder path was the one to create the Staff of Chaos. The Sage ends the story by teaching the pupils that the only way to become truly great is to try all the possibilities on your own. I rated this book 3 stars. Then we have Ghost in the Storm by Adonato Liotelli. This is a brief account of a dangerous encounter with the Falmer during a blizzard near Windhelm. It's really not that interesting of a story, and it is a bit drawn out. Anyway, that's the entire story. It's just about a blizzard. I gave this 2 stars. Then we have The Golden Ribbon of Merit by Empyrean Brum. This is a skill book that increases archery. It's about 2 old friends catching up, and one of them is trying to teach the other friend how to shoot a bow properly. The friend that's teaching the other friend is very masterful. They're very skilled in archery. While this isn't a particularly great story, I do want to explain or tell you the one part of it that is interesting, or the ironic twist at the end, and why it's called The Golden Ribbon. So the friend who is bad at archery takes an accidental shot that travels so far, it flies through the master archer's window and pins his golden ribbon of merit for archery to the wall. And that's the only really interesting part. That's like the whole setup for the story, to be honest. Anyway, I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Halgard's Tale by Tavi Dromio. This is about a group of friends arguing about who the greatest warrior ever was. And Halgard, our character of the story, or one of them, brings up Hilalu Passaroth, a guy so skilled in heavy mail that he could move faster inside of it than outside of it. Passaroth's wife and his armorer try to have an affair during a tournament. The armorer sabotages Passaroth's armor, And it's then implied after this, because Passeroth gets the upper hand of it, that when he goes to reconcile with his wife, that he didn't even need to take off his suit to make up with his wife. You might think this is a skill book for heavy armor, but it's not. I rated this story 2.5 stars. Then we have The Hope of the Redoran by Turiel Nerith. This is a short tale about how prophecies work. A boy named Andis was born with a prophecy in the form of a rhyme, claiming that no blade could harm him and his blood would never drop on the ground. This led him to become an incredibly arrogant jerk. However, his cousin Athen found the loophole. He used a wooden club to batter Andis to death, killing him without spilling a single drop of blood. Anyway, I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Incident at Necrom by Jonkila Both. This book increases your illusion skill. It follows a team of experts hired to clear out a vampire den near Necrom. They look down on the sorceress Mesitha because she seems shy and claims her only skill is altering perception rather than real combat. After they clear the crypt and the team leader dies, the other 2 remaining survivors aside from Mesitha, who are Nitra and Osmic, decide to screw Mesitha over. They sit in a tavern planning to run off with all the gold, laughing about how her useless illusion spells won't help them or won't help her find them. However, Mesitha was standing in the room the entire time using invisibility. She swipes all the gold while they are out grabbing a drink, leaving them with nothing but their own greed. I thought this was a pretty fun concept, but I didn't think the execution was super great, so I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Kolb and the Dragon by Anonymous. Okay, so this is an immediate 5 stars because this is a choose your own adventure book. What a privilege. Except it does state that it's a book for Nord boys, which, like, what era is this? This is the 4th era, not the 2nd era. Rather than telling you every single possibility, because I'm just gonna say that you should go and find this book yourself and read it and choose your own adventure, and then comment below what you got. I actually was pleasantly shocked how much the devs gave us for the choose your own adventure book, considering I felt like there wasn't that much for the riddles or the recipe book. Here is how my adventure went. Kolb was a very brave Nord warrior. One day, his chief asked Kolb to slay an evil dragon that threatened their village. "Go through the mountain pass, Kolb," his chief said. "You will find the dragon on the other side." Kolb took his favorite axe and shield and walked to the pass, where he found a cold cave, a windy cave, and a narrow trail. I chose enter the cold cave. Kolb stepped into the frozen cave, but his Nord blood kept him warm. A smelly tunnel climbed ahead of him, and wind howled from another to his left. A ladder was nearby as well. I chose climb the ladder. Climbing up, Kolb found a camp. He met a wise man who shared bread and showed him 2 paths to the dragon's lair. One went through the hills, the other through a marsh. I chose take the hills. Kolb stepped onto a rocky hill. He could see the dragon sleeping below in a tavern off a road nearby. I chose climb down. Kolb found the lair where the dragon slept, tendrils of smoke wafting from its nostrils. The air made Kolb's eyes sting, and he nearly slipped on the bones of men picked clean. The beast lay on its side, the throat and belly both waiting targets. I chose strike the neck. The head of the axe lodged itself in the tough, scaly neck of the beast. It wailed and thrashed, but Kolb held on and eventually sawed through the neck, killing the beast. Kolb returned home victorious, and his village was never bothered by the dragon again. You can also gift this to your adopted child in the game, which is really cute. Surprisingly, this book appears in so many locations in the game, but I feel like I've never come across it. It could also be that I just never paid attention, but like, I swear, I remember the Beggar Prince coming up all the time. But I feel like this book, I've never stumbled across it. I don't know. Let me know if you have. I rated this 5 stars. Then we have The Last Scabbard of Akrash by Tabar Vankideh. This story is about Pelaya, a noble's daughter who sneaks out to visit a master armorer every day to learn how to repair blades. But the townspeople think that she's having a scandalous affair, but the truth is that she is secretly maintaining her father's legendary sword so her Khajiit lover can use it at night to lop the heads off of slave traders. Sadly, Pelaya's lover is poisoned, and when he stumbles into her room, her father finds them. Her father kills her with Akrash, the sword that she's been learning how to repair, and in a fit of grief and rage, Pelia takes the sword and kills her father. The city ends up believing that her father was the killer all along and that he died by his own hand, leaving Pelia free to disappear forever. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have The Locked Room by Porbert Litumley. This story follows a Redguard woman named Diana who likes to take her time picking locks to truly understand how they work, but her teacher thinks this is silly and that she's very slow. He believes she's too slow, so he locks her in a room with a ravenous vampire to force her to pick the lock quickly or die. She escapes and returns the next day, impressing him and convincing him to let her install a pick-proof lock on that same door. She then locks him in the room just as the sun is setting, telling him the only way out is with the key. As the vampire wakes up and starts tearing him apart, he finally sees the key hanging on a chain around the vampire's neck. This is a skill book that increases lock picking. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have The Marksmanship Lesson by Ala Laleth. I like this one quite a bit. It follows a cruel plantation owner who forces his slave Dob to teach his son archery. He spends weeks teaching the boy to shoot arrows high into the air at weird angles instead of hitting targets. The father doesn't understand that Dob is actually teaching his son ballistic trajectory. He thinks that he's wasting his time. So Dob gets whipped in the courtyard, and as he's getting whipped, he yells out specific instructions to the son and specific coordinates. The boy fires an arrow high over the house. It arcs perfectly and drops straight into his father's neck. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have The Mirror by Berdier Reens. Now, I'm gonna do something that I haven't really done yet in this series, which is, I'm not gonna tell you the full story of this book. I really loved this story. I think it's a actually truly good short story just in general. This is also a skill book that increases blocking, but that's not really important. What I'm gonna say is that it tells the story of an undefeated legendary warrior, Mindo Thrax, who finally meets a mercenary who matches his skill perfectly, and they duel in a stalemate for over an hour. I think it's a really touching story, and it actually made me feel kind of emotional reading it. I don't know, maybe I was just fatigued and tired and in a weird mental state. It's really short too, so it's not that big of a commitment, but I rated the story 5 stars. Then we have Mystery of Talara by Mira Licketh. Mira Licketh. This is a series split into 5 books, and this is a much longer story than the ones we've read previously. I think this is about like 8,000 words. It's not anything compared to The Real Baron Saya, but this is a lot more of a complex story that is sort of like The Real Baron Saya in that there's a lot of shifting characters, actually well-developed characters, an arc that reaches a pretty decent conclusion, I would say. And if you're looking to read something probably a little bit longer, but maybe not as long as The Real Baron Saya, I would say The Mystery of Talara is actually a pretty good one. I genuinely did enjoy this story. I would say it's probably the most twisty of our books. Our first book is about a celebration in a kingdom. The celebration is called the March of Beauty. And this is a celebration of beautiful women who are prostitutes walking through the kingdom. One of the women is named or is called Gina, who meets Lady Gilia, the daughter of the king of the kingdom. Now, these two ladies are mirror images of each other. They look very similar, but not exactly identical. And we learn in this book that 20 years ago, the original rulers of this kingdom were assassinated. And Gina might actually be a princess and the rightful heir to the kingdom. It's believed that her real name is Princess Talara, or that's her identity, and that she had grown up being called Gina. She doesn't remember much about her past, but neither does Lady Gilia for that matter. Book 1 ends with Gina actually being pushed off a cliff, and as she falls, a memory resurfaces of her falling. She remembers being a child on these same rocks with her cousin, and it's likely to believe that that was actually Lady Gilia. And she remembers how to survive a fall when this flashback occurs. She goes limp and hits the water, symbolizing her rebirth and the return of her identity as Talara. Book 2 is actually a skill book for restoration. Gina is given a restoration spell to heal her injuries. We also learn in this book that Lady Julia was so traumatized by the murder of the royal family that it broke her mind, which is why she didn't remember Gina when she saw her. We also meet Lord Strail, who is an Imperial ambassador. We end this book with Gina telling him her story and who she believes she might be. Book 3 is a skill book for destruction. We meet another character, Lady Brisciana, who was actually in the game Daggerfall. There is a plot to help bring Gina back as a princess, and Lady Brisciana tries to help Gina and Lord Strail with this plot. The book ends with an ambush, and Lord Strail showcasing his magic and getting the better of the ambushers. Hi, okay, it's editing me. So my file for the last 2 books got corrupted. It's the only file that did, which is great, but it's also the file that contains me explaining the really confusing bit about this story. But I guess you could say I'm a real YouTuber now. Anyway, let me tell you how the story concludes. So book 4 is a skill book for illusion, and in this book we actually get a mention of Jagar Tharn from the real Baron Zaya, or just from her lore in general. In this book, Gina is trained by an Imperial Nightblade named Persecus. He teaches her illusion spells, and I really just want to mention this because I love his name. It sounds like Prosecco, my favorite drink, and what I will be rewarding myself when I finish this video. Gina and Lord Strail find a letter written 20 years ago by the previous king, likely Gina's father, just before he was murdered. The letter was meant for the Emperor, warning him that a priest named Jagar Tharn had stolen magical artifacts like the Staff of Chaos. It's pretty cool that how interwoven her story is. I meant it when I said that. It's so interwoven. But because the current king murdered the previous king to take the throne, he also inadvertently stopped a warning that could have prevented Jagar Tharn's 10-year-long imperial simulacrum, you could say. This makes the assassination a crime against the Empire and not just a local murder. Then we get to book 5, which is not a skill book, but it does tie the story all together. So, what happens to all of our players? Now, stay with me on this one. The real Lady Julia was believed to have been murdered during the assassination. The real Lady Julia was sitting on the throne when the assassins came in to murder the princess, and they thought she was the princess because she was sitting on the throne, which talk about bad timing. During her attack, she was thrown into a river and believed to be dead. Meanwhile, the real Princess Talara actually survived, but a grief-stricken nursemaid convinced her and herself and everyone else that the real Princess Talara was actually Lady Julia because the nursemaid couldn't accept that Lady Julia had died. She was supposed to protect her and cared for her, so she was just overwhelmed by this information and couldn't accept it. And because Princess Talara and Lady Julia looked so alike because they're cousins, everyone believed it. It was easy to pass this off as the truth. Princess Talara also believed this because she suffered memory loss, so the real Princess Talara was raised to believe she was Lady Julia, and that is the Lady Julia we are introduced to in book 1. And we find out that Gina is actually the real Lady Julia. Alright, so just once again, the Lady Julia in book 1 is actually Princess Talara, and Gina is actually Lady Julia. And Gina reveals all of this, and that's how the book ends. I rated this 4 stars. Then we have Of Fiori and Holger by Anonymous. This is basically a Nordic Romeo and Juliet. It follows 2 warriors who are so perfectly matched in combat that they fell in love. How sweet. Fiori dies though, and Holger is unable to live without her. He's so grief-stricken that he builds a massive tomb for them and takes his own life to join her in Sovngarde. This book is an instruction manual for the dungeon Ansilvund in Skyrim. By following the order of the animals mentioned in the text, you can unlock the path to their final resting place. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Palla by Von Myersted. This story is split into 2 books. In book 1, the story is narrated by a young, unnamed initiate of the Mages Guild. He finds a mysterious artifact. His superior, Magister Ilther, recognizes it as an item of necromancy and orders him to destroy it. Instead, our narrator keeps it and discovers it is a tool used to resurrect a loved one from the grave. He later in this book sees the statue of Paula, which depicts her, this woman, in a violent, mortal struggle with a monster. He falls instantly and unnaturally in love with the stone image of the dead woman. He becomes obsessed. In book 2, the narrator confesses his love for Paula and attempts to resurrect her. But the name Paula turned out to belong to the monster and not the woman. The story ends with the monster echoing the narrator's own romantic obsessions back to him. "Kiss me," it howled. I read online that the opening lines of this book are reminiscent of Lolita by Nabokov. To be honest, this book reminded me a little bit of Pet Sematary as well. Another mention of that book. Maybe we have some Stephen King fans among the developers. I also mostly like this story for its metaphor for manifestation, which I took this to mean that you can try and force something so much because of how bad you want it that you can turn what you desire into something monstrous. The woman and the monster in this book to me are two sides of desire. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we get Purloined Shadows by Woofin Jarth. Our man Woofin Jarth is back with another story, and not an impressive one. It's about a arrogant young burglar who tries to impress a master of stealth. Our master of stealth actually takes her on as a student for like the ultimate heist. They are stealing the cloak of the Daedric Prince Nocturnal, and she camouflages herself perfectly and waits for her master's distraction so she can strike, only to realize that she was the distraction. 2.5 stars. Also, this is a skill book for pickpocketing. Then we have The Rare Guard by Tennis Moral. This is a skill book that increases light armor. A Bosmer mercenary is left behind to defend this place. Anyway, the only really interesting bit about this story is that our mercenary gets poisoned, but he feels a tingle from the poison, which actually like energizes him. And we learn, and we get a bit of lore from this, that in-game light armor actually allows for much faster stamina regeneration than heavy armor. So that's why it didn't really poison him, or the poison didn't really affect him in a negative way. It actually gave him energy instead because of the light armor, which is kind of cool. I gave it 2.5 stars. Then we have Surfeit of Thieves by Anis Noru. This is a story that follows a pair of thieves, Heria and Indik, who try to rob a mysterious group called the Order of Saint Iad Nua. Haraya sneaks into the armory while Indik provides the distraction. Haraya gets caught though by a monk, but is mistaken for a guest named Lady Tressid. She joins their feast wearing a hooded robe and notices that everyone is using weird backwards names like Hittilites and Noahaturap. She laughs along, we all laugh, thinking it's just a silly game until the hourglass runs out. The monks aren't human, we learn. They're actually monsters. The man she thought was her partner, Indik, is actually named Esruok, which is first course backwards. She finally spells her own alias, Tressid, backwards, which is dessert. We find out that the Order of Saint Iad Nua is actually a bit of wordplay by the author. If you spell Iad Nua backwards, you will get Onday, one of the 3 major vampire clans in Morrowind, and this book originated in Morrowind. This clan is known for their magical prowess and cruelty. The Onday don't just kill their victims, they make like a theatrical meal out of them. This is also a skill book for lockpicking. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have The Tale of Drozira by Sonia Vett. This story is about a Khajiit father telling his cub the real story of the Battle of Red Mountain. So now we get a Khajiit version of the events. We've had the Elven version and the Nordic version, so naturally we need the Khajiit version. According to this father, the Khajiit weren't always caravan traders. They were once the elite warriors of Alkosh, which is also another word for Akatosh, the Dragon of Time. Akatosh is one of the 9 divines. The whole dragon break thing from part 1, all of that exists because of Akatosh. Now this book says that the Nords take all the credit for their legends, but they only won, and they can only brag and be so proud because the Ash King, Wolfhearth, was riding a massive Khajiit named Drozira into battle. That's right, folks. History is a lie. We learn that Drozira saved the Ash King's life by pouncing on the dwarf orc, Dumak Dwarf King. Yet the Nord bards leave the cats out of their songs entirely, according to this father. The father ends by telling his cub to basically stab a bard if they speak ill of Khajiit, because without them, Skyrim would have been lost. And to be honest, I believe the dad. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have The Three Thieves by Anonymous. This is a story that follows Sathis, not Sithis, Sathis, different, who is a master thief who thinks he's so much smarter than his two student partners, Galsaya and Imolen. After a successful heist, Sathis double-crosses them, sneaks away with all the gold to his private estate in Vivek, and settles into bed, smugly imagining his partners waiting for him at a tavern like fools. Well, he wakes up and realizes that he's the fool. Before he can even scream, a hand clamps over his mouth with the thumb under his chin, the exact technique for a clean, bloodless kill that he had bragged about to them before. This is a skill book for your sneak skill, by the way, and I rated this 3 stars. Then we have A Tragedy in Black by Anonymous. This book is so sad. This is a tale from the time of the Oblivion Crisis. The plot follows a boy who summons a Dremora to help him make a magic dress for his mother's birthday. The Dremora tricks the boy into accepting a black soul gem as a gift. The Dremora then shows the boy how to fill the gem by casting Soul Trap on him and ripping his heart out. The story ends with the Dremora heading off to find the boy's mother with a second empty gem. Anyway, I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Vernacus and Borlor by Tavi Dromio. This book increases the archery skill. A legendary archer dies in shame, believing he missed his target, while the Daedra that he was aiming at is falsely hailed as a hero. However, fate eventually intervenes when that same missed arrow, which had been lodged in a wooden shrine, is dislodged and stabs the Daedra, proving that the archer never truly lost his perfect score. I actually gave this 2 stars because I think the irony is fun, but it's told as a story by a group of friends, like a campfire tale, which is personally not my favorite type of storytelling, especially when I'm reading it. And I also didn't really necessarily love the writing or just how the story was told. I didn't like the execution of it necessarily. Then we have Withershins by Yakut Tawashi, which, okay, I audibly laughed at this one. I laughed out loud. The story follows Zaki, an Argonian tailor who is losing his mind because every conversation he enters is locked into like a rigid alphabetical order. It's very zany. He finally visits a mystic named Octoplasm at a shop called Paradox, like Paradocks, who uses a ritual called Withershins to break the curse. Zaki performs this ritual to stop the alphabet madness, but since the ritual is all about going backwards, he accidentally flips his entire life. The story ends with the mystic speaking in reverse and Zaki moonwalking out of the shop. Even though everything is technically backwards now, Zaki finally feels normal. This book was so whimsical and weird, and I just loved it. I absolutely adored it. This book also increases the restoration skill. I rated it 4 stars. Then we have The Woodcutter's Wife by Mogan, son of Molag. Does that ring a bell to you? Well, it should, hopefully, because this is the answer to The Cabin in the Woods, our first technical fictional horror story. The one about the screaming woman in the woods. Do you remember that one? Well, this is her origin story, her villain origin. She's our weeping, screaming, laughing ghost woman, and now we get to know how she came to be. I honestly wish she was an NPC. If they had put an NPC in like a certain part of, or in an area in Skyrim in the woods, and it would just be a ghost NPC screaming and wailing through. Is there a mod for that? Both these books are written by the same author. The story follows a starving woodcutter's family who is saved by a traveling mage. Every night, the mage pulls out a scroll and summons a massive feast for them. But instead of just enjoying the free takeout, the woodcutter's wife gets paranoid. She thinks that this is a devil's bargain and that the bill is eventually going to come due. She becomes so desperate that at night, she chops the mage's head off with her husband's axe. And it turns out the mage wasn't evil at all. He was just a nice guy with a lot of scrolls. With his literal last breath, though, he curses her to wander the woods as a ghost, carrying the same bloody axe and burning every time the sun comes up. So I guess he was a little evil. The moral of the story, once again, no good deed goes unpunished. I rated this 3.5 stars. I liked it more than The Cabin in the Woods. Then we have The Wraith's Wedding Dowry by Voltha Gra Yamwort. This is a story that follows an orc woman named Wraith, and she's quite the character. She's a legendary thief. She's getting married to her former jailer. His name is Wad Warg. Love that. But her old gang of thieves, her old pals, try to stage an intervention by stealing her wedding dowry, which is a suit of armor, and hiding it in a dangerous shrine. Wraith has to sneak into the shrine, dodge her old partner's axes and maces, and retrieve the gift. Wraith is a badass though, and I love her. She manages to fight through an entire ambush without taking a single hit, and not because she worried about dying, but because she doesn't want to wrinkle her dress or dent her husband's new gift. She does make it to her wedding unbloodied. I rated this 4 stars. Then we have Thief of Virtue by Anonymous. The story follows Ravius Tyrannus, a thief who breaks into a baron's castle to steal a rare coin collection. He's clearly a pro, disabling 7 traps with a fork and a piece of string, but he gets cornered by the guards during his escape. His only exit is through the Baroness's bedroom. Recognizing that the Baroness is a bit plain when he sees her, and that she might be feeling neglected, Ravius pivots from stealing gold to stealing virtue. He smooth talks her into hiding him from the guards by surrendering the coins and spending the rest of the night robbing her of her virtue. I rated this 3 stars. And that was our last book in the fiction section. I really loved this section. I loved so many of the fiction books in Skyrim. Okay, on to the next. Part 10, Journals and Logs. There are 15 journal and log books in Skyrim. I would go as far as to say that this section is probably the most read section of every player. And it's because a lot of these you will have probably read, considering that they were involved in major quest lines in Skyrim, involving the factions, etc. I would assume a lot of players would read logbooks and journals, if anything, in the game, because it would pertain to the storyline that they're invested in versus just a random book. The first journal we have is none other than Cicero's journal. Cicero is arguably an insane and amazing NPC. At the very least, he's a memorable character who looks after the Night Mother's body. He's part of the Dark Brotherhood questline, and I would even go as far as to say that he is the Dark Brotherhood questline. The silence of the Night Mother combined with the isolation of guarding a rotting body for so many years literally snaps his mind. We learn all of this from reading the journals. To cope with the crushing silence, he adopts the personality of his final contract, a merry jester, and a fun Easter egg for you. Possibly my favorite Easter egg from this entire series, and if not that, then definitely one of them. Do you guys remember the adoring fan from Oblivion?
I'm going to follow you and watch you and worship the ground you walk on. Let's go.
If you don't know this adoring fan and you didn't play Oblivion, then this might have gone over your head. And if you did play Oblivion and remember the adoring fan, then I hope you caught this. In this journal, Cicero confesses to killing a grand champion by posing as a starstruck fan. This is possibly, at least what I took it to be, a direct reference to the adoring fan from Oblivion. Now, the events of the Oblivion game are 200 years before the events of Skyrim. So you could say what I'm alluding to couldn't possibly be true. I mean, it's not like he's the real Baron Zaya who lives for hundreds of years, right? He's just...
I'm going to follow you and watch you and worship the ground you walk on. Let's go.
No. I actually like to think that this is fully meant to show that the devs were obviously taking inspiration from the adoring fan when they were writing Cicero. I really do think that if the adoring fan was allowed to evolve and grow up and age, and that storyline could have developed, it would have probably led to a darker storyline, something like Cicero's. That is the energy we definitely get from the adoring fan. But I also do love the idea that, like, What if they are the same person? My best guess is that the devs were saying this is sort of like the kindred spirit of the Adoring Fan. Cicero and the Adoring Fan are kindred spirits. This is sort of a nod to him, a tribute to the Adoring Fan, Cicero as a character. I don't think they actually intended to mean that Cicero and the Adoring Fan are the same person, but I do love To Dream. I rated this 4 stars. Then we have Confessions of a Khajiit Fur Trader by The Fur Trader. The story follows an unnamed Khajiit who grows up in the gutters of Elsewhere. After a caravan heist goes wrong and his brother dies, he takes the furs from the caravan to sell, but he also starts skinning his own brother to sell the pelt as a memento. This is not a Khajiit custom, by the way. This is just what this Khajiit decided to do. And once he does this and sees that a Khajiit skin fetches 3 times the price of a wolf pelt, he becomes a full-blown serial killer businessman. He realizes that the civilized society have a dark and expensive taste for a forbidden luxury. He promises to even sell his own skin one day for a king's ransom. I rated it 2.5 stars. Then we have Dairy. No. Then we have Diary of Fair Agarwen by Fair Agarwen, translated by none other than Calcimo of Markarth. This dude, Baron Zaya, Anonymous, Woofin Jarth, they are the stars of this entire anthology. Truly. Anyway, this story is a translated journal from a snow elf, otherwise known as a Falmer, named Fair Agarwen, written during the height of the Nord-Falmer War. She's hiding in a cellar with her family, mourning the death of the Snow Prince and dreaming of a day when they can walk freely in the light once more. Fair ends the diary with hope, believing they can be born anew and live with the sun on their skin. And a really cool and dark detail that Calcimo discovers is that the Falmer used water drip bowls to track time in the dark. They left marks on the bowl, and when the water filled, they would know the time of day, which I found to be a really fascinating detail and bit of world building, truly. I rated this 3.5 stars. It's so haunting and sad that we know their fate, and I think this one is worth reading if you're into the Dwemer and Falmer history and lore. Then we have A Dream of Sovngarde by Skarden Freewinter. The story follows Skarden Freewinter, a Nord soldier sitting in a cold camp hours before the Battle of the Red Ring, the massive fight to take back the Imperial City from the Elves. That's what that was. He prays to Talos and has a vision of Sovngarde. He crosses the Whalebone Bridge and gets a face-to-face meeting with Ysgramor himself. Ysgramor tells him it doesn't matter how you lived, it only matters how you die. I rated this 2 stars. I wasn't that riveted by this, to be honest, but it might just be because I've been reading about Nordic stuff for so long at this point when I got to this book that I was like, yeah, Sovngarde, the Whalebone Bridge, I know, I've heard it. Then we have Flight from the Thalmor by Hadric Oakenhart, edited by Ashed Ibn Khalid. I first want to say I love the conviction and rebellion of this man. I was actually moved by his journal and written speech. The story follows Hadric Oakenhart, a bard who graduated from the Bard's College in solitude and thought he was being a hero by singing pro-Talis songs in Markarth. He did it 7 days in a row. The Thalmor Justiciars kidnapped him and planned to bring him to some prison camp. Hadric managed to strangle a guard with his own chains and escape, but now he's spent 9 days running, and that's where we leave off. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Gallus's Encoded Journal by Gallus Desidenius, which, we remember from the Thieves Guild in Skyrim, hopefully. We mentioned him quite a bit in part 1. His other journal, his other book, had quite the revelation in it. If you watched part 1, you hopefully know what I mean. But we have another journal by Gallus. He was the former guild master of the Thieves Guild in Riften, just as a refresher. And it's basically a log of his own slow motion murder. In it, he writes that he suspects his partner, Mercer Frey, is stealing from the guild's vault and living a life of luxury on the side. The story ends with Gallus walking into a blatant trap at Snowvale Sanctum because his quote honor as a guild master forced him to go. He knew it was a hit, but he went anyway. I love Gallus, I do, but he is a fool. The book is also written in code, but translated, which I think is a cool touch. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have The Journal of Myrtil Angoth by Myrtil Angoth, translated once again by Calcimo of Markarth. This man is doing a lot, to be honest. The journal belongs to Myrtil Angoth, a young snow elf who spent his childhood training to be a warrior like his father. After the Snow Prince falls and the Nords start winning, he thinks the Dwemer are going to help them reclaim their land, but we all know they were actually walking into a trap. I rated this 2 stars, actually. It was very short and we don't really get much new information. It's still sad, which of course, if this is like the first book about the Falmer that you've ever read or that you will ever read, it probably might be interesting. But for me, it's 2 stars. It just was super short and there wasn't really anything that I was like, oh, I didn't figure that out, or I didn't know that before, or I didn't read that before. Okay, then we have Rising Threat by Lathanil of Sunhold, edited by Praxis Errataim, hopefully. This series comprises 4 volumes, but I will summarize them. The story follows Lathanil of Sunhold, an Altimer who survived the Oblivion Crisis on Somerset Isle. He watched the legendary Crystal Tower fall, and then watched the Thalmor step out of the smoke to claim they were the ones who saved everyone. Lathanil also theorizes that the Thalmor want everyone else fighting each other so they can consolidate the elven races. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Ruins of Kmelze by Rollard Nordsen. The story follows Rollard Nordsen, an archaeologist with a massive ego who heads to the cliff city of Kmelze in Morrowind. Kmelze? Not sure. He spends half the time complaining about superstitious locals. He accidentally wakes up a giant steam centurion, the Golden King, before his mage companion, Master Aram, saves his life by flash freezing the machine's steam boiler. I thought this was a fun read. I rated this 3 stars as well. Then we have Skorm Snowstrider's Journal by Skorm Snowstrider. This journal is over 4,300 years old. That's pretty cool. Skorm Snowstrider was a commander under King Harold in the First Era. He's out hunting the last of the snow elves when he encounters dragon cultists who were supposed to be extinct. Upon breaching their stronghold, Skorm found that the cultists actually took their life to avoid surrender, some of them using poison, and then many of Skorm's men died after drinking from a contaminated well that had that poison. The journal, which can be found in the Siege on the Dragon Cult quest, was left behind with the hope that someone would later ensure the cultists were permanently defeated. I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Twin Secrets by Brarilu Theron. This is a skill book for enchanting. The story follows oh my gosh. I'm glitching. We're just gonna call her Theron, okay? So Theron is an old master enchanter on his deathbed. He reveals that the law of firsts, a rule that an item can only be enchanted once, is the bane of every mage's existence. We also learn that he hunted down a dragon hiding in the smoking ruins of Vardenfell, defeated it in a duel of pyromancy, and traded its life for a secret. The dragon taught him that while you can't add a second enchantment later, you can weave 2 at once if you split your brain down the middle. Left hand for one spell, right hand for the other, eyes on one, ears on the other. Are they trying to throw an Easter egg at some new game mechanic? Can you imagine? Probably. I gave this 2.5 stars. Then we have Venaris Vulpin's Journal by Venaris Vulpin. The journal belongs to Venaris Vulpin, a vampire who fled Somerset Isle after some unpleasantness with an inquisitor. He follows a myth to Skyrim to find the Blood Spring, a fabled source of power. The red water grants strength but doesn't satisfy hunger, and it's incredibly addictive. Instead of walking away, Venaris realizes he can use this red water to turn a local ruin into a den of addicts. He's got the mind of a businessman, very business savvy, you might say. like our Khajiit fur trader. I'm sure they would be great friends. He lures people in with the promise of a miracle drug, lets them become dependent on the spring, and then harvests them as a ready food source that never tries to leave. Fun fact. Is it fun? Interesting fact. The Redwater Den is actually a location in the game, in Skyrim, and you can meet and fight Veneris Vulpin. All right, if any of what I said bothered you, well, you can let him know. If your character drinks from the well, though, you contract nearly every disease in the game, including vampirism. Also, his entries begin in the 4th Era 200 and end in the spring of the 4th Era 201, exactly the date when your player begins their journey. I rated this 2.5 stars because it does have cool lore, and this is gonna sound like it doesn't make sense when I say, but it wasn't that interesting to read. Sometimes with these books, they have really cool lore or like a piece of lore, some concept that I really like and I want to rate it higher. But then like the process of getting there and reading everything just to get to this one part or something that made it interesting. It's like, did the ends justify the means? And sometimes they do, but like how much? Then we have Veneris Vulpin's Research by Veneris Vulpin, a continuation. This one though is a little bit more interesting because Veneris is actually kind of funny in this one. We learn about something called Redwater skooma. Veneris actually started making skooma from this water and moon sugar. Just your local brewery, your dive bar, your secret pub. Fun fact, Redwater skooma is a unique item you can only find at this location. It's significantly more powerful than the standard stuff found in the rest of the province. We also have a picture. Veneris drew us a picture of the Blood Spring Chalice. I rated this one 3 stars. Then we have Wabbajack, a funny book for sure. This is by Pelagius Septim III, and I've missed him. It's like meeting an old friend again. So Pelagius tries to summon a Daedric Lord. Are we shocked? But he summons the wrong one. Again, are we shocked? And doesn't realize it because he's so crazy at this point. He's given the Wabbajack a staff that turns reality into a dice roll, pretty much. And he ends this book chanting the name until the words lose all meaning. The Wabbajack is actually a real weapon in the game and possibly the best one. It might turn a dragon into a chicken or a Dramora into a sweet roll. I rated this 5 stars. Then we have Watcher of Stones by Jelif Sig, Thane of Bjorn. This was written by an old adventurer who spent his entire life trying to be the chosen one. He did it all. He beat the companions in Whiterun. He did favors for the Bard's College, and he quested across every inch of Skyrim. But despite all his heroics, the Standing Stones never reacted to him, and he never felt chosen. We all have our final bosses. He spent his final days sitting by the Guardian Stones near Helgen, watching travelers touch them for luck, while he slowly realized he was just a mundane person born under a fixed star. We see these stones all the time. We can use them whenever we want, like a place to charge your phone. Anyway, he would say that we are the heroes of old because we can actually change our destiny. I rated this book 2.5 stars. Part 11, Notes and Letters. There are 9 notes and letter type books in Skyrim. There are way more letters and notes scattered around Skyrim, but these are the notes and letters that are in the form of books. Our first letter book is Charwick Konige. I'm gonna say Konige. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Koniinge. Charwick Konige. Letters by Charwick and Konige. This story is told through a series of letters between 2 backstabbing friends. Charwick and Konige are searching for Azura's star. The entire first 3 volumes are an elaborate lie. Charwick pretends to be in High Rock fighting werewolves and Daedra lords just to keep Konige busy in Morrowind. He even fakes his own death in a letter to get Konige to stop looking. But Konige is a professional killer who doesn't like being played. The final letter is sort of a gotcha note from Konige to Charwick, written while Konange is literally waiting in the shadows to murder him. It was a pretty interesting read. It sounds weird to say about backstabbing, but had some charm. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have A Game at Dinner by Anonymous, and guess who's back? Back again. Never are they gonna leave us? Baron Zaya. That's right, her history just is so complex. Yes, she's sort of here in this book because this book features one of her children. It says that she only has 2 children, but we know that from the Thieves Guild quest in Skyrim that she actually has another child named Dralsy, and that was the child she had with the bard who stole the Staff of Chaos and became Nightingale, allegedly. This story follows an anonymous spy for House Dress embedded in the court of Prince Helseth. This is the son of Baron Zaya, the legendary Baron Zaya. After hearing that Helseth met with a poison maker, the spy goes to dinner and refuses to eat, thinking that he's being clever. Helseth, however, tells his advisors that the food was fine, but the cutlery was poisoned. He places a bowl of the antidote on the table and says only the spies need to drink it to survive. Our spy in this book nearly breaks, but Helseth's chamberlain, Burgess, snaps first, drinks the liquid, and confesses he's a spy for the Queen of Wayrest. Helseth then reveals that the cutlery wasn't poisoned at all, the antidote was the actual poison. Burgess essentially executed himself by confessing. Also, the intro says Helseth and Baron Zaya actually helped publish this letter. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have the Nirnroot Missive by Sindarion, edited by Sharmarin Raythorn. The missive is a speech by Master Alchemist Sindarion. He explains that Nirnroot was originally yellow gold and lived in the sun, but the sun's death eruption of Red Mountain nearly wiped it out. The Nirnroot performed a magical metamorphosis by absorbing the ash salt, which is a highly magical substance from the volcanic clouds. The root literally healed itself, changed its glow to blue, and started growing in the dark to hide from extinction. I rated this 3 stars. I thought this was really interesting lore, and we finally get something about the Nirnroot, which is quite a mysterious plant, like the most mysterious. Reading this made me more intrigued by it as well. I really did like that there was an explanation that involved something that I thought was a little bit more complex with the evolution and also tying in the magical fantasy elements. I just like all this stuff. I do personally enjoy when science and fantasy try to merge with each other. There's a lot of, experimentation there that can be quite fun. I do wish we knew why it made noise though, aside from just helping the player out when searching for it. Then we have On the Great Collapse by Archmage Deneth. Ooh, an interesting letter. The journal is a letter from Archmage Deneth to Jarl Vladimir in the wake of the Great Collapse. He points out that the college is the only thing left standing because of ancient protective magics, which to a grieving citizen of Winterhold looks exactly like the mages cast a spell to save their own skin, while the rest of the city slid into the Sea of Ghosts. Deneth basically tells the Jarl to shut down the gossip that the mages caused the disaster, ending with a subtle threat that the college will be there a very, very long time, implying the city might not be. Damn. The letter confirms that unnatural storms battered the coast for an entire year before the cliff finally gave way. While Deneth denies responsibility, many theorists believe the mages were experimenting with something that disturbed the Sea of Ghosts. Some fans actually speculate that the Great Collapse was actually caused by a magical incident involving the augur, the glowing ball of energy you find in the midden, which Archmage Deneth would obviously want to cover up. I rated this 3.5 stars. I thought this was really good lore for the College of Winterhold, possibly one of the best. Then we have Report, Disaster at Aynith by Lord Potreed. And oh my gosh, was this so tedious. This should be in the history section. This was a laborious read, I'll be honest. The report, authored by Lord Potreed, details the disastrous invasion of the continent of Akavir by Emperor Uriel V in the late Third Era. Despite assembling the most powerful fleet in army in Tamrielic history, The empire was essentially defeated by the climate and logistics in Akavir. I rated this 1 star. Then our last letter book is a very sad one. This might be the saddest thing that I have read in the series, and that made me feel almost slightly on the verge of tears. This is called The Windhelm Letters by Raylia, Stessel, and Chappell. We're told that these letters were recovered from a strongbox found after a fire consumed a house in Solitude in the early part of the Third Era. Nobody by the address name lived at the home, and it is unknown how long the family had owned the strongbox. The letters are believed to have been written during the reign of Jarl Elgrer the Unminded, who ruled Windhelm in the Second Era. These letters were so touching and haunting. The letters chronicle the suffering of Raylia and her children in Windhelm, while her husband, Thessalonius, is in Solitude, presumably working for a resistance or political freedom. Raylia is living through a nightmare, though, during this time. Through each letter, we read the psychological degradation of the family. It starts with a lack of coal and paper to even sometimes write these letters, then moves to starvation and mysterious magical executions by the Jarl's wizard. It really does paint the time and Windhelm and just the environment that these letters take place really well with such brief reports. I would say this is a really good example of how to build atmosphere. I think it's done really well with few words. The letters end with the children writing to their father they barely remember, while their mother is likely organizing a desperate, likely dangerous revolt against the Jarl and their living situation. I felt the most sad after reading this, and it really did stick with me. I remember this letter. I just love Raylia and mothers who do so much for their children, and I know I'm taking this so seriously, but for real, shout out to the moms. Anyway, I rated this 4 stars, and that was the last in our notes and letters section, which means that we are about to head into the last section of books in this series. We made it. Part 12, Religion and Prophecy. There are 49 religion and prophecy books in Skyrim. Our first book we start with is 16 Accords of Madness by Anonymous, possibly Anonymous's best written book. This is a legendary collection of stories where Sheogorath, my favorite, outsmarts his fellow Daedric princes. This line from the book actually made me think of how almost every famous person in the world is usually very infamous or very hated, and not usually the most loved. There are exceptions, of course. The line says, "It is the hatred of the mortals which confirms greatness, and not their love." I can't drink. Wait, how do I get my tea? Oh my gosh, that's difficult. There are 3 tales, but the last one is the one I want to talk about because it's my favorite. Basically, the other 2, Sheogorath outsmarts 2 Daedra princes. They are interesting, but I think this is the best one. This is also the darkest of the 3. Malakath is the prince of the outcast and the protector of orcs. Sheogorath gives a legendary orc hero a cursed blade called Neb Crescent, which induces a mindless bloodlust. Sheogorath tricks Malakath into seeking vengeance for a murder. Malakath decapitates the killer using Sheogorath's blade, only to realize the man he just killed was Ameg Gro Kera, his own son. Because Malakath used Sheogorath's blade, his son's soul is now trapped in the Shivering Isles forever. Malakath, the god of the sworn oath, was forced to break his own protection over his children. I rated this 3.5 stars because anything with Sheogorath is a good time. Maybe not for the person on the receiving end. Basically, the moral of this book as well is never bet against a madman. They don't play the game that you're playing, which makes them more dangerous. Then we have Aedra and Daedra by Anonymous. This is a cool piece of lore and a cool concept of duality. This book actually explains the difference between an Aedra like Akatosh or Mara and a Daedra like Azura or Sheogorath. It isn't about good versus evil according to this book. The good gods, Aedra, are essentially dying or truncated because they gave their power to create the world, while the bad gods, like the Daedra, kept all their power but are now stuck as outsiders who can only change what others have built. I really love this concept, and I think this is such an interesting piece of lore. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot to build on story-wise with this for sure. I'm a sucker for anything philosophical, so this one really got my mind spinning. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Alduin is Real by Thromegar Ironhead. Proud Nord. Proud spelled Prowd. The spelling in this book is very important because it's wrong. This dude, this Nord, he doesn't know how to spell, but that doesn't stop him from writing a book, which is truly inspiring. So for any writers out there, what's your excuse? Someone online asked who would ever publish this book because of all the misspellings, and someone online answered Sheogorath, obviously, which I take as canon, and the answer to anything that doesn't make sense in the world. The book is a proud Nord defense on why Alduin, the World Eater, and Akatosh, the Dragon God of Time, are not the same being, while the idiot Imperials, idiot spelled Idiutt, tried to claim Alduin as just the Nord version of Akatosh. Thromegar correctly points out, though, that you can't have a god of good also be a dragon of evil who tries to eat the world. Thromegar is actually right. In the deeper lore of Skyrim, it's eventually revealed that Alduin is the firstborn of Akatosh. The Imperials, the idiot Imperials that our author hates, are mostly the scholars of the Third Era who tried to unify all religions into the 8 divines. They wanted every province to worship the same gods, so they claimed the Nord Alduin was just a local name for Akatosh. Our author's point is simple. Nords actually saw Alduin during the Dragon War thousands of years ago. To a Nord, Akatosh is a distant concept, but Alduin is a historical trauma. You don't worship the thing that tried to enslave your ancestors, and you don't have to know how to spell the truth. I rated this 3.5 stars. Kudos to our dude, which goes to show that intelligence isn't measured by how educated you are. And that's really the moral of this story. And then we perfectly come to this book, The Alduin Akatosh Dichotomy by Alexander Simon. This is like the evil twin sister to the last book. Alexander Simon, the high priest of the Akatosh Chantry, represents the peak of imperial enlightened scholarship. His goal is to prove that Ariel, the elven god, and Alduin, the Nord dragon, are just different names for the same Akatosh. While Simon thinks he's being a dignified and well-read scholar, he's actually coming off as an arrogant know-it-all. That's the official review. He dismisses thousands of years of Nord history as primitive bedtime stories and unreliable oral tradition, completely ignoring the very real possibility that the Nords are right. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Boethiah's Proving by Anonymous. This book recounts a summoning of Boethiah, the Daedric prince of plots and deceit. We have this line, tongue wet with hate. I just wanted you to know that. In Skyrim, reading this book actually starts the quest Boethiah's Calling, which is actually a pretty crazy quest. If you haven't played the quest, I actually don't want to spoil this one for you, so I would just say, start a playthrough. Jump back into it. Do this quest. I rated this book 3 stars. Then we have Boethiah's Glory by Anonymous, which is just a little chant in Boethiah's name. 2 stars. Then we have the Book of Daedra by Anonymous. This book is just a definitive index of the 16 Daedric princes that we have so far at the time that this book was published. It's a pretty good condensed list actually, and I rated this 3 stars. Then we have the Book of Life and Service by Anonymous. This is a series of litanies that frame eternal slavery as a blessing. Anyway, I rated this 1.5 stars. It definitely world builds. I'll say that. Then we have the Book of the Dragonborn by Prior Emmeline Madron. This book tackles the divine mystery of what it actually means to have the blood of a dragon. We learn that being dragonborn is an ancient Akaviri prophecy about a hero who hunts dragons and absorbs their souls. It would be so cool to go to Akavir one day. 3 stars. I feel like this is a good, decent book to read for some idea of what it means to be a dragonborn if you don't care to do this and read all the other books. Then we have a children's Nod by Anonymous. Very cool book. It is the simplified version of the Elder Scrolls creation myth. The book uses blood as a metaphor for the nature of the gods. So we have Padme's blood, which equals Daedra, so pure change and chaos. They have no link to the Nirn part of the family, which is why they can't create anything original. Then we have Anu's blood, which equals stars, so pure stasis and light. And then we have mixed blood, which is the Daedra. Because they contain both, they have the fluidity to be both good and evil, and the precision to actually build a world. I would say one of the most interesting details in this book is the mention of the Hist, which is the sentient trees of the Argonians. They are considered the most alien things on Nirn. I feel like this book is really great in just once again exploring larger concepts in this world and just philosophical concepts. I mean, when you're building something as large as this in a narrative with so many subplots, it can get overwhelming. And sometimes just leaving mystery and allowing your reader, your player, to form conclusions themselves is like the best thing you can do. I feel like this adds to that because it offers contradictions to what we are told in other books, but also it offers some more interesting lore that we don't get from other books. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. This book also really expands the world beyond what I even knew in the Elder Scrolls and in Nirn. And I feel like if you want to read something that really breaks down the Elder Scrolls lore regarding races and religion and just read one book that sort of gives you that, I would read this book. Then we have The Dragon War by Torhall Bjork. This explains how the ancient Nords transitioned from a multi-totem religion to a brutal dragon cult dictatorship, sort of. I'm kidding. It really just explains how Nords transitioned from one religion to another. We learn, quote, that for dragons, power equals truth. I rated this 2.5 stars. This bell keeps hitting this thing. Sorry if you can hear it. Ah! It's like a helmet. Now it's on properly. All right, back to the program. And then we have an overview of gods and worship by Brother Hetchfeld. This is an analysis of why the gods of Tamriel are so frustratingly inconsistent. We are taught a saying that is common among wood elves, which is one man's miracle is another man's accident, which I love that saying. I'm gonna take that one. I'm gonna start telling people that. This book is a big discussion just about religion and the different beliefs in theories and contradictions. It was a pretty interesting read, to be honest. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Invocation of Azura by Sigilla Parate. Sigilla has a realization that most Daedric princes only want a piece of you, your secrets, your violence, or your curiosity. She explains why she became the priestess of Azura and her journey worshipping other Daedric princes, which actually in this book, she refers to a Daedra prince as a princess, which is the first time I've come across that in any of the books. I talked about before how the Daedra are supposed to be genderless and that the gender they are given changes depending on the book. And this is the first time I've seen the word princess though. Usually, even if a Daedric prince is referred to as a female, they're still referred to as a prince. Pretty interesting, I thought. Anyway, she's worshipped many of them, studied them, and she decides that Azura is the best one because Azura demands your entire being, including your love. I rated this 3 stars. It was a pretty interesting read. If you really are into the Daedra, I would recommend reading this book. Then we get The Legend of Red Eagle by Tredane Dren. The Legend of Red Eagle is the origin story of Pheolin, who is the first king to unite the Reachmen. We learn that he traded his soul to a hag raven to become the first Briarheart. He saved his people by becoming a monster, pretty much, losing his humanity to gain a flaming sword. In Skyrim, reading this book triggers the quest Rebel's Cairn, and you can meet the Red Eagle. I rated this book 2.5 stars. Then we have The Lost Legends of Skyrim by Talskar the Elder, Archivist of Winterhold. Talskar breaks down 3 legends: the Pale Lady, a ghostly woman who wanders the northern marshes forever seeking her lost daughter; Red Eagle, who we talked about just a moment ago, an ancient king who rallied his people and drove back the armies of Cyrodiil with a flaming sword; and Golder, a powerful wizard from the First Era. This is also a quest book, and reading this triggers the quest Forbidden Legend. You have to track down the fragments of the Golder amulet across 3 different ruins. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have The Lunar Lorcan by Faldrune, and he's made an appearance again. Not Lorcan, Faldrune, the darn fool. It's spelled that way backwards. He's a controversial author. Anyway, he's the one who wrote Dragon's Break, the thing about time breaking and multiple timelines existing, and that's why everyone's playthrough is canon, technically. And he presents another theory to us in this book, like he did in Dragon's Break, but this is a different theory. Our darn fool states that instead of looking at the moons as mere rocks or celestial spheres, the Lunar Lorcan theory posits that Maser and Secunda, the 2 moons orbiting Nirn, are literally the rotting flesh divinity, that's in quotes, of the god who created the world. He's basically saying that the 2 moons orbiting Nirn are considered the sundered body of the god Lorcan. Lorcan is also known as the missing god. There's a lot of mystery in Nirn. I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Lycanthropic Legends of Skyrim by Lentulus Eventus, Order of the Horn. We learn of were-vultures in Valenwood. That's right. This book is an account of Lentulus trying to verify legends of werebears and werewolves in Skyrim. He visits Jorrvaskr in Whiterun, where the companions are, and is offended when the, quote, fearless warriors get nervous when he asks about werewolves and asks him to leave. He thinks that they're just scaredy cats. He thinks they're scared of these so-called werewolves, when obviously in reality it's because the inner circle are werewolves. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Monomyth by Anonymous. This book is a comparative study of how humans and elves view the creation of the world, otherwise known as Mundus in the Elder Scrolls, the mortal plane. Humans believe they were created by the gods. The elves believe they are descendants of the gods. The book mentions the order of PSJJJJ, which is the Psijics. Their view is there are no gods, only spirits. This book says that change is the only sacred force. This is why the Psijics are so powerful. They don't waste time praying. They study the gray, maybe to manipulate reality directly. I actually really like this view. I thought this philosophy is so interesting, and I kind of agree with it. Change really is the most sacred force. That's just my opinion. I'm just a girl with a helmet. I'm a sucker for philosophy. I was very fascinated by this take. This book also breaks down other views of how the world was created from other races and cultures. You get the viewpoint of the Red Guards that focuses on Satakal, a serpent that consumes itself to begin new cycles. This book just offers so many different perspectives. The Psijic conclusion is one that I think tries to tie in all of these beliefs together, and their belief is that the creation of the world essentially comes down to sacrifice. I rated this 4 stars. Then we have Mythic Dawn Commentaries by Mankar Cameron. We mentioned him in part 1. He played a bigger part in the game Oblivion. He was the leader of the Mythic Dawn. This book originated in the game Oblivion, and it is a 4-volume set, and it's basically just recruiting pamphlets for Mankar's cult. While most books in Tamriel describe the world as it is, Cameron uses these volumes to argue that Nirn is actually a plane of oblivion that was stolen by the Aedra from its rightful owner, Mehrunes Dagon. Fun fact though, when you take the first letter of every paragraph in the 4 volumes, they spell out a hidden message. The message is, the Green Emperor way where tower touches midday sun. Also, it's insane writing, this whole thing. It reads like insanity. I felt myself growing insane as I read all of this. It was kind of fun. I rated this 3.5 stars. We have Myths of Sheogorath by Mimophinus. We get 3 stories about how Sheogorath causes madness. My favorite, though, is the one about a king. The king enforces strict rules on the kingdom, and the people are unhappy. Sheogorath causes the next generation of children to all be mad because of this. But the king doesn't realize this until years later because all kids seem kind of weird and mad. The king's own son is affected, and because the king overlooks all of this, his son eventually stabs him in his sleep and says, as he kills him, "It's the most practical thing I could do." That's crazy. Not even Joffrey from Game of Thrones was that brutal. He wishes. The story ends with this new king dying too, and the people of the kingdom not noticing. All these kids that were turned crazy because of Sheogorath grow up and become the community, the citizens of this kingdom, which means the entire kingdom is mad. They're so mad, in fact, that the king's son who killed him, right, he was ruling and he eventually died, but the kingdom didn't even notice because they're all so crazy. And eventually the castle became a house for mad children, which is kind of sweet. I rated this 5 stars. Then we have Nerevar, Moon and Star by Anonymous. This book captures the Ashlander, so the Dunmer, perspective on the most pivotal moment in Morrowind history, the Battle of Red Mountain. This book is technically supposed to be a series of monographs, which are like very intense, scholarly, detail-oriented research papers or books. But this book is actually pretty short, so it's just like summaries of different, I guess, perspectives. This is a story about Nerevar, a leader who united the great houses of the Dunmer and the Ashlander tribes by swearing a sacred oath on his ring to respect their ancient traditions. Although this united front successfully defeated the Dwemer at Red Mountain, Nerevar was betrayed and murdered by ambitious leaders from the great houses who then elevated themselves to godhood and broke his promise. Ashlander prophecy foretells that Nerevar will one day return to overthrow these false gods, fulfilling his original vows. To be honest, I wasn't really interested in this. I'm sorry if you like this story. I rated this 1.5 stars. Then we have Nightingales, Fact or Fiction by Wilmina Roth. This is a skeptic's look at a group that every thief in the province calls a myth. The author presents the evidence of forged midnight armor, mysterious bird symbols, only to conclude that the answers are difficult to formulate. Basically, are the Nightingales real? I rated this 2.5 stars. I don't know if I can keep this helmet on. Okay, I wanted to commit to the bit. It's just so heavy. The things I do for a mediocre joke. Then we have The Old Ways by Solaris the Lore Master. This is a book that outlines the customs and the philosophy of the Sijic order. We have a great opener and also a great point. We who know the old ways are well aware of the existence of a spiritual world invisible to the unenlightened. Just as one living in a kingdom, but unaware of the political machinations underneath, may see a new tax or battle preparation as the caprices of fortune, many observe floods, famines, and madness with helpless incomprehension. End quote. The Sijics don't worship gods in the traditional sense. To them, gods in Daedra are just the spirits of superior men and women who got really good at the game of power. It's important to remember that Venus Galerian, do you remember him? He's the one who founded the Mages Guild. He created that invention that could enchant any item if you had enough money, from Feyfoken, the enchanted quill. He also was part of the Sijic order at one point, but he thought their ways were too calculated and secretive, and he wanted to bring magic to the masses. He was a Sijic dropout. The Sijics looked at him and his ways and approach and predicted it would lead to disaster, and considering the number of necromancers the Mages Guild eventually produced, they weren't necessarily wrong. There's also this cool concept in the book, quote, "Change is the force without focus or origin." This quote was mentioned in the book The Monomyth about the various religions in Nirn. This seems to be sort of a mantra or a saying among the Sijic order. Okay, but back to the quote. So it goes, "Change is the force without focus or origin. It is the duty of the disciplined Sijic to dilute change where it brings greed, gluttony, sloth, ignorance, prejudice, cruelty, and to encourage change where it brings excellence, beauty, happiness, and enlightenment." There's also this quote. This is just me telling you a bunch of quotes from the book. I really liked what this book had to say, or found it enlightening. Quote, "If the man the Psijic counsels acts wickedly and brings oegnither," that's a word, which means bad change, and will otherwise not be counseled, it is the Psijic's duty to counterbalance the oegnither by any means necessary. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have Opus Coolus, LeMay Ball by Mabe Awanil, translated by the University of Gwilym Press, 3rd era, 105. So this is possibly the darkest story so far. The Windhelm Letters are the saddest story. I would say this is the darkest and possibly the saddest story. Definitely the darkest. It's a super short story, actually, but I guess this is sort of the origin story for vampires in the Elder Scrolls. It explains how Molag Bal, the Prince of Domination, decided to pick a fight with Arkay, the god of birth and death. Bal found Arkay's dominion over death a bit too prideful, so he decided to break it. He chose LeMay Beolfog, a woman of the Nedic people, the ancestors of modern Nords and Imperials. He did every horrible thing to her he could. Brutal. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So horribly, she wept, and her screams became the shrieking winds. Maybe this is the saddest story of the entire series, truly. I guess I would honestly, thinking about it now, I would say this one, and then the Windhelm Letters. This is just so sad. It's so violently sad, so horrific. I hate Bal, and on my next playthrough, I will be doing everything to go against him. When the nomads tried to cremate LeMay, the fire didn't destroy her, it actually woke her up. She then did horrible things to them. The text emphasizes that this was a specific attack on Arkay's sphere. And again, Arkay's law is that everything that lives must eventually die and stay dead. And then Bal's corruption states that vampires are restless death. I did rate this 3 stars because this is crucial lore. Again, don't love this. Don't necessarily want to reread it. Then we have The Posting of the Hunt by Anonymous. This is pretty much a manual for the ritual of the innocent quarry, better known as the Wild Hunt of the Daedric Prince Harrison. This book is a direct reference to the events of the game Battlespire. It really just outlines the hunt. I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Ruminations on the Elder Scrolls by Septimus Cygnus, College of Winterhold. We have this quote from the book. "We are the chicken inside the egg, but also the dirt. The knowledge from the scrolls is what we push against to become full-sighted ourselves." Wow, I loved that quote. Throw me a confusing sentence and I'll rate your book 5 stars, or at the very least 3.5. This text is a collection of metaphors, all designed to explain the impossible, how a mortal mind can process information that exists outside of time. Septimus, our author, knows he's insane, but he views his madness as the only way to perceive the stabbing light of the scrolls. In the game, Septimus is obsessed with a massive Dwemer box. That's right, you can meet him. He's part of the Elder Knowledge quest and the Discerning the Transmundane. Septimus believes that the Dwemer box possibly contains the heart of Lorcan, or the heart of a god, but it actually contains the Agma Infinium, the Book of Hermaeus Mora. This ties his ruminations directly to the Daedric Prince of Knowledge. That book doesn't have any text, it just has some really cool symbols. You technically can read it. Anyway, I rated this book 4 stars. Then we have Shazar and the Divines by Fastilis Junius. This book exposes the PR campaign that created the most famous religion in Tamrielic history. We learned that Empress Alessia, also known as Saint Alessia, we talked about her in part 1, had subjects that were both elven and also allies that were Nords. Because of this, and because she wanted to unite everyone and still possibly be a favorite among the people, concessions were made, and Empress Alessia instituted a new religion to try and keep everyone happy, which we know as the 8 Divines. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Sithis by Anonymous. This is the manifesto of the Dark Brotherhood and the Morag Tong. In Sithis, the traditional hero gods are the villains. While this book is a philosophical text, the Dark Brotherhood takes it literally. They believe Sithis is a sentient dread father who wants souls returned to the void. There is actually a Daedric code at the end of this book. It reads, Ei Herma Mora Alta Don Pad Home Lacan Ai, which obviously translates roughly to the knowledge of the weapon of change Lorcan is I. It links the Prince of Knowledge, Hermaeus Mora, to the concept of Padme/Sithis. I rated this 3 stars. Then we have Songs of the Return by Anonymous, and oh my god, this is an 8-volume series of the story of Ysgramor and his 500 companions. I just don't care about Ysgramor. Basically, after the elves slaughtered the first human settlement at Sarthal, Ysgramor returned to Atmora, gathered a legendary army, and came back to perform an attack on the elves to reclaim the land for humanity. I actually rated this 3.5 stars because I think it gives a lot of really good lore. We talked about so much of it in part 1 in the histories and lore section. Then we have Spirit of Nirn by Anonymous. This one was the shortest passage, or one of the shortest passages, and it had like 2 typos. They probably wrote the Songs of the Return and then wrote this one, and they were like, I don't even care. That's how I would feel. Anyway, this is a short meditation on the relationship between the mortal plane and the spirits that inhabit it. I rated this 2 stars. Then we have Spirit of the Daedra by Anonymous. I believe this is written from the perspective of a Daedra viewing mortals. Because Daedra are immortal, they cannot understand the concept of hope. To them, being doomed to failure and loss, which they view mortals as being doomed to failure and loss, should be paralyzing for them, and they're so perplexed why mortals don't just give up automatically. They don't realize, though, that for mortals, the fact that time is always running out for them is exactly what makes all of their actions so meaningful, which I think is really beautiful. The book ends with a question asking, why do you not despair? I rated this 3.5 stars. Then we have The Totems of Heresine by Anonymous. I don't know why I looked around my entire room when I said that. Sorry if that looked creepy. This is a guide to the 3 ancient artifacts that allow a werewolf to move beyond being just a beast and to become a weapon of the Lord of the Hunt. In Skyrim, if you join the Circle of the Companions, you actually go on a quest with Ayla the Huntress to recover these specific totems. I rated this 1.5 stars. Then we have Trials of St. Alessia by Anonymous. It says that this book is a fragment from the Trials of St. Alessia that depicts the deal that St. Alessia made with Akatosh to keep the Oblivion Gates shut. This book explains that in further detail, which we talked about in length in part 1. I rated this 3 stars because if you haven't read the other history books, I feel like this is a good book to read that gives you a general summary of that whole event. But since we already talked about it in length, this is just sort of summarizing what we already went over and what you could read about more in other books. Then we have The Waters of Oblivion by Anonymous. This book suggests that Oblivion isn't just a place, but an encroaching force that, once let in, cannot be easily pushed back out. In the Elder Scrolls cosmology, water is often used as a metaphor for memory. To describe Oblivion as waters suggests that the Daedric realms are made of the discarded memories and possibilities that were rejected during the creation of Mundus. I rated this 2.5 stars. Then we have Words of Clan Mother Anisi to Her Favored Daughter by Anonymous. This is another take on creation myth in Tamriel, but through the perspective of the Khajiit. This text provides the Khajiit's take on the monomyth, again, how everything was created in the Elder Scrolls. I genuinely think reading these lines from the book are the best way to explain this book. Our first quote is, "And they gave birth to Alkosh, the first cat, and Anur said, 'Alkosh, we give you time, for what is as fast or as slow as a cat?' And then they gave birth to Magris, the cat's eye. 'Magris, to you we give the sun, for what is brighter than the eye of a cat? And they gave birth to Mara, the mother cat. Mara, you are love, for what is more loving than a mother? And for our final quote, and they gave birth to Surrendar the runt. Surrendar, we give you mercy, for how does a runt survive except by mercy? This is pretty interesting if you're into Khajiit lore. I gave it 4 stars. And then believe it or not, we have our final book. I feel like I have to do something ceremonious. Like this is the final book of the entire series. And I can't believe I did all of this. Wow, I read a lot of books. I'm both relieved and sad. Alright, anyway, our next book is Ingol and the Sea Ghosts by Anonymous. Ingol and the Sea Ghosts provides the moment where Ysgramor, the harbinger of us all, was humbled by the very ocean that brought him to Tamriel. He buried his son and crewmates at a site that you can actually visit in the game, Ingol Barrow. This is a really short story, to be honest. I wish I had more to say. I rated this 2.5 stars. Anyway, that was our final book. Let's conclude this series. Part 13, Final Thoughts. When I first set out to do this, I did not know what it would require of me. I was naive, but I think I needed to be in order to do this. I think if I had known how much effort it would take to make this project, to read all these books, edit, note take, I probably would have put it off. I'm glad I didn't. I had this idea for a YouTube video before I was even posting regularly. I always just thought it was a cool concept, and I don't think I'd ever seen anyone who actually broke down all the books, which now I understand why I've never seen anyone do that before. It's a lot of work. I read all these books in 1 week, and reading all of these books in such a condensed time frame was both good and bad. The bad being burnout, but the good being that while I consumed all of this, the lore was all so fresh in my mind. It made reading all of these books feel so cohesive. It was almost like a book puzzle. I was placing the pieces together, which made reading more rewarding, especially as I continued down the list of books to read. I think one of the most beautiful aspects about this is the time capsule that it is. So many of these books are over 20 years old in real life. Some of the authors in real life are no longer with us, not in the flesh anyway. Their spirit is, their ideas, their creations are. I think one of the best things you can do for a story, especially fantasy, is to leave mystery and room for interpretation. The contradictions in this anthology are what make this entire thing so strong. You don't always know what to believe, which breeds online forums and debates and speculations and fun. Allowing the player or the reader to have an imagination and bring that forth and encourage that is what connects them to the narrative even more and to the world. I also want to say that I really loved the order in which I read the books. I said in part 1 of this series that I used the Library of Skyrim, which I will link below. There is also the Imperial Library, which is an incredible source as well. Both are great sites. I would say the Imperial Library has all the information and is the wiki page of it all, but the Library of Skyrim organizes the books in a way that makes the reading incredibly meaningful. Also, the Library of Skyrim is just the books in the Skyrim game, and the Imperial Library has all the books of the entire Elder Scrolls series. If you follow the order from the Skyrim library, you start with the biographies, which I think is brilliant because you start with Baron Zaya. She is a pivotal, incredibly interwoven character and universe, really, in the Skyrim books, in the Elder Scrolls books in general. I don't think there's any perfect way to organize it, but I do feel that I was reading the books in an order that allowed me to be introduced to concepts and characters early on that would be brought back in later books, and that made reading those later books more meaningful. Having a baseline understanding made these stories way more fun to read, and I was more invested as time went on. I really do feel that this entire anthology is an entire universe separate from the game. Venus Galarian, Baron Zaya, Woofin Jarth, Anonymous, all of these people are not people you interact with in Skyrim, but I feel like I know them, and I feel like I even know them better than some of the NPCs I interact with in Skyrim. As for my rating system, I rated this based entirely on opinion and nothing else. It's what I enjoyed, what I felt was relevant or interesting to me, or what was cleverly written in my opinion. It by no means is objective. I know a lot of people that like matter-of-fact writing or reading history more than fiction. A lot of people enjoy the books from the history section, which was my least favorite section, which is fair. That's why there is a variety of books, which I think is fantastic. Just like not every person is someone's cup of tea, neither is every story or writing style. Just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, fun is in the madhouse of the mind. Yes, I did just make that up. Yes, I am proud of that. That's why you should take my ratings with a grain of salt. The purpose of this video is to be relaxing, give context to books that you might or might not read, and allow you to pick and choose what books you might actually want to read, to look at or give some roadmap of them. There is also some interpretation to be made with some of these books where I offer mine and you can make your own. That's why there is so much contradiction, because it adds to the conversation. Objectively, this entire anthology is fantastic because of all the hard work, effort, and contributions. I will also say that my ratings can't be objective because of the order that I read them. For example, if I had read Gallus's journal first and Baronziah last, I would have probably rated his journal 1.5 stars or maybe 2.5. But having read Baronziah first, it made me rate anything mentioning her story or lore higher because of my personal excitement and knowledge. It's the same thing with the Skyrim fiction books. They pretty much all follow the same formula of an ironic twist. And one of my favorites, Breathing Water, was rated high also because it was one of the first books in that section that I read. Maybe had I read it last, I would have reached fatigue with the same formulaic endings as I had and rated it lower just because of that reason. And I mean, this is how it goes for any kind of reading. Anyway, to wrap this up, I honestly can't pick my favorite book, but I will give you the ones that still stick out to me, the ones that are in my mind without having to look back at the list of books. And they are The Real Baronziah, Feyfoken, Breathing Water, The Mirror, Chorus Pie. No, I'm just kidding, not that one. But that one did stick in my mind, so there's something there. And maybe one day I'll revisit this list. That could be fun as well. In the meantime, I have my final and last secret book to share with you. One that I won't rate because I wrote it. I felt that to top off this project, I needed to put my money where my mouth is and attempt to write my own Skyrim book. If I'm going to be talking about and rating all of them, I wrote a short story involving my canon playthrough of my character in Skyrim. I talked about her in a video before where I spoke about video games in general. This short story is a love letter to the Elder Scrolls series and to video games in general, and the attachments and connections we make with them. Okay, I'm signing off.